listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Fault lines.
Live from across the divided states of America, it is time now for another edition of the most disruptive show covering news, politics, and events from across these disunited states we call America and the increasingly divided, fragmented surface of our globe in the independent corner. I'm your political analyst, Shane Stranahan.
And in the left corner, I am the indefatigable, actually very fatigable, burning and burn the darkness, your political analyst, Jamarl Thomas.
And together we are Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. That's right, you hear it. We're working on the connection, but I am joined by Jamarl Thomas. Jamarl, how's it going?
I'm alive. Glad to be here with you. Rough week, but I'm okay.
Well, good on you for joining, although it sounds like you might need to take a nap or something, but hope. No,
it's just, I'm just congested. I gotta be honest, I don't think it's COVID, because it doesn't seem to be that. It seems to be like a random virus or something, which is worse. No, not worse, which is aggravating. It's like we're in quarantine for what, like a year and a half. I don't get sick or flu or anything for like 2 or 3 years. And within like 2 months, all of a sudden I have a flu that just puts me down.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I can see that.
Because it also makes me think, like, if you got sick with this, aren't you also susceptible to COVID? Meaning, if COVID is more transmissible, supposedly, and you were able to get hit with just a rando virus, it's just, I don't know, it's just weird.
It is. Yeah. No, I hear you. Well, and part of it is, of course, things are opening back up. And so it's just, I think more people are getting more sick than usual because people are circulating around each other, in a way that we really weren't for like a year plus there. And then things kind of opened back up.
And stuck in the house.
Yeah, exactly. And you can see it in the numbers right now with everything spiking. With today I'll get into it, but today's numbers are worse than they've been in a while.
Yeah, the numbers are bananas. I haven't watched much news over the week. I've been getting into, I guess, Twitter brawls like yesterday. And that might be the monologue today. But the news that I did see was on COVID.
Yeah.
And yeah, the numbers are bananas.
Yeah, specifically. Well, I'll get into it.
But look, we said they were. I mean, this was something that we predicted.
Yeah. Let's get into the headlines because we're getting specifically on that. Let's just get right into it. In COVID numbers this morning, in COVID news, we're standing at about 235,000 cases from yesterday, 235,000. That's up from the highs of 130 some odd thousand that we've seen recently. And again, if you look at it on a chart of a case count, the number of cases, 230,000, the most we ever had, is significantly more, but 300,000. The most new cases we had in a single day ever in the United States was 300,000. 230,000 in a single day compared to 300,000. Admittedly, there's still a gap, but that's not that big of a gap, if that makes sense. And this is up like crazy from just last week when it was like 130,000.
That's insane.
It is insane.
That's insane. And we keep pointing out, I haven't changed too many of my requirements. I think the difference is I may have gone out to maybe 3 restaurants since the opening of stuff back up. And we kept pointing out, it's like, look, there is this gentle, or not gentle, but this ungraceful switch over.
Yeah.
And what makes it even worse is like this country, we're only using vaccines. It's like the vaccine is our only weapon. And that feels off. I mean, we're going to have Dr. Kogan on, but Kogan is right. It's like nutritional benefits, vitamin D, whatever, to lower the numbers. It's all hands on deck stuff.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason in this country, it's purely vaccines. It's very weird.
Well, and if that were part of the... I don't know exactly who would debate that. Don't exercise, the couch potatoes of the world. But no, my point is that's a lot harder to argue with. And that's something that both the unvaxxed or the anti-vaxxers or whatever, and the vaccinated and the pro-vaxxers have been saying both together. It's something they can actually agree on. In other words, that's something we could theoretically come together over in our response to this stuff. But also telling people to get off the couch and exercise or change their eating habits. Usually it's like teaching. Most of us are old dogs at this point, and it's fairly hard to teach us new tricks,
Well, the vitamin D thing. seems vague to me. Like, it doesn't, I don't.
That's a pretty easy, it's a pretty easy adjustment.
Yeah, like some of the stuff is just mild, that's all I mean. And then it's like, we get flack on Twitter from people who have this belief that the only thing we are for are vaccines. And it's always aggravating me. Because it's like, you guys are being cultish on either ivermectin or hydrochloroquine, whatever.
Hydroxychloroquine.
Always, we just care about the science.
We do, but here's to our credit, we talked about that stuff. It's not like we were. The thing is the media would often just suppress or dismiss those kinds of things, and then we would get coverage for not like devoutly promoting them. And yet, when there were clinical trials on them, we would come out, we'd talk about them. I would do this stuff pretty consistently last year before you ever came on, during the heyday of the pandemic, when all of these options were completely up in the air, and there wasn't even really a sense yet of, okay, this is the establishment's favored treatment, and this is the one, or these are the ones they reject. There wasn't even really like clarity about that at the time. So and thank goodness in some sense, because that meant that there was a level playing field analytically for figuring out what actually works, which medicine is going to help. And we were reporting on that stuff. Anyway, I want to get back to the headlines here. Over the past week, this has driven the average of cases up. We're currently standing at about 124,000 new cases on average per day. That's an increase of 118%. Again, more than a doubling from the average we had 2 weeks ago. 50% of the total American public has been fully vaccinated at this point. 59% of residents have received at least one dose. That's up from 58%. As of this morning, the coronavirus has infected about 36,047,000 people across the United States and killed 617,300 people about. Last month, Governor Ron DeSantis issued an executive order banning schools from requiring students to wear a face mask upon returning to studies. Now DeSantis has threatened to withhold pay from superintendents and board members who would mandate the masks in schools. In national news, according to a new memo by the Secretary of Defense, all military personnel will be required to get the COVID-19 vaccine by September 15th. However, if the vaccine gets FDA approval, the military mandate will go into effect immediately. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin stated, quote, "I will not hesitate to act sooner or recommend a different course to the president if I feel the need to do so. To defend this nation, we need a healthy and ready force," end quote. And the 3-day birthday bash for Barack Obama in Martha's Vineyard concluded yesterday. There were hundreds of high-profile guests invited, including John Legend, Chrissy Teigen, Dwayne Wade. That's Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Am I wrong? Dwayne. Oh, I'm being very, very confused. Dwayne Wade. Oh, basketball player. See, I'm out of touch. And Tom Hanks, actor. I know that one. None of whom or the rest of the guests were required to wear masks. This is the big thing from the event. And there was like leaked footage from Erykah Badu. I know who she is. Erykah Badu, great musician, singer, songwriter even. Anyway, leaked footage from Erykah Badu on Instagram or something that she like apparently deleted immediately after, with like a bunch of people dancing in the background, including Obama, and nobody's wearing masks. Or at least he's not wearing masks. Maybe some people were. But Obama's certainly not wearing a mask while dancing, toe-to-toe with people and in a crowd. Now, the point is, they're vaccinated probably. You can presume they're vaccinated, but this comes as a lot of the rest of us are being told not to congregate whether we're vaccinated or not without wearing masks specifically, right? Jamarl, this has been talked about, but I think we should talk about it a bit. What's your take on this?
Same Shane. It's Obama. He's black. Why are you attacking him for not wearing a mask?
Exactly, racist.
No, man, I feel you. I don't know. I mean, we come to our office and we don't wear masks. And so I don't know. All of those guys, I would prefer them not to congregate like that, just because I consider all of them petri dishes when they do. But I mean, I go to restaurants. I mean, is it different? That
is the weird thing right now, is that you can still, this is the thing that is truly bizarre. You can still go into a restaurant in DC where you have to wear a mask, and you can eat inside a relatively crowded restaurant. A lot of people in these restaurants who are not wearing masks. And they can take their mask off at the table. It doesn't make sense.
It's very weird. I mean, it's like, because, and I realized after the fact, take my wife's, what I chose to do with my wife that day was probably a poor choice. I went to a Brazilian steakhouse where they walk around with the meat and everything else. And it's like, yeah, when you first walk in, you have a mask on, but as soon as you sit down, you don't. Every time you're walking around, you don't. And it's just all the restaurants. That's not just DC, I would imagine. New York, the other places are the same.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, is it fair to hold Obama to a standard that we don't hold ourselves?
I don't know, but is it? But
look,
if Obama's part of the class
ones.
that's holding us to this standard and then not doing it themselves, and admittedly in the U.S. it's there's concern about this stuff, but if you look at where the pushback against the people who aren't wearing masks is coming from, it's in like Europe, really. You might have seen those videos, Jamarl, of like people,
the protests,
the patrols of people on the streets and the protests, and the like in France with the newly mandated health pass stuff for restaurants, just like officers sort of roaming around the streets asking people for proof of vaccination, in restaurants, just going in and systematically like sweeping, okay, do you have your vaccine card? Do you have your proof of recovery? That kind of thing.
I mean, keep in mind, France was a country where they were running through the beaches, ripping off niqabs from Muslim women. So yeah, they can be hardcore about this stuff.
Yeah.
Did you see the judge in the U.S. that was mandating people get the vaccine or go to prison?
No. Goodness.
There's a report in the U.S. where basically the people who would come up for, let's say, probation or parole or whatever, the judge would be like, you need to go get a vaccine or otherwise I'm going to put you in jail for the rest of your time or something like that. They're doing stuff like that.
That's intense.
I mean,
and a lot of this...
That's intense. That's way too far.
It's super intense. And this is, again, there's this conversation about, okay, well, Americans wouldn't tolerate that. And I think that is one good way of looking at it. I don't know. But another question that comes to mind, though, is for a lot of these fines, for instance, like if you're a business who is supposed to require that people wear masks, but you don't, for instance, if you're breaking county regulations or a state mandate, whatever, and you get fined, what I was hearing was, and it would be good to actually have a conversation with somebody, is I was hearing that a lot of those fines were simply being thrown out. So they were being handed out, but when, people went to contest them, basically it was just, okay, you don't have to pay it, that kind of thing. So there's this weird superficiality about it. I don't know. We got a couple more headlines. It's good having you back just so we can chat about this stuff, but we've been tardy on getting through the headlines, so I want to get to them. International news now. The Taliban has been making major advances across Afghanistan as foreign troops withdraw. They've taken 6 regional capitals over the weekend since Friday. The Islamist movement have rejected international calls for a ceasefire. More than 1,000 civilians have been killed as a result of the conflict in the past month, and at least 27 children were killed in 3 days, the United Nations says. Now the Taliban has their eyes on northern Afghanistan's largest city, Mazar-i-Sharif, that if it fell would mean nearly complete control of the north of Afghanistan. So that is I'm sure you've been watching this too, Jamarl. Big deal. We spoke about this briefly yesterday with Maram Sousley, but certainly more to talk about soon. And it's basically what you can see happening, is what we were talking about, is that when the U.S. withdraws, the Taliban has effectively nothing stopping them. We'll come back to it. A couple more headlines here. Nothing stopping them from rolling across the country. In Greece, ongoing fires are the worst natural disaster the country has seen in recent memory. The island of Evia is currently facing the worst of it. That island is situated to the north of Athens, the capital, and fire has ravaged the island's forests. Fires in Greece and in the Balkans and neighboring Turkey are driven by high temperatures. 113 degrees Fahrenheit is the number that I'm being seen thrown around for these Greek fires. Virginia Roberts Giuffre sued Prince Andrew for sexual abuse in a New York court yesterday. This is a big move. The allegations claim that Giuffre was lent out by Jeffrey Epstein for underage sex with Prince Andrew, also known as the Duke of York, his title. And again, Prince Andrew, one of those major figures associated with Epstein, widely, previously accused by Virginia Roberts Giuffre, but she hadn't sued him, and now he will have to answer. Well, we'll see whether or not he answers to that. We'll see how this actually plays out, but the Epstein story is not dead, because, of course, the whole point of that story is not that he was acting alone, but that he was a network. He was the hub. We think he was the hub for this network of blackmail stuff that was going on, and people as high profile as Prince Andrew are now facing it. Anyway, those are headlines. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Jamarl, I skipped over a couple of things there. Anything you want to jump back to?
I thought a few of those were interesting, actually. The Taliban, for example. So again, I think we often have a tendency to jump ahead of our stories just because we tend to be better than many. And we made the point that this was going to happen, that the moment that the U.S. leaves, that the Taliban was going to just roll through the country. It felt like I kept making this allegory towards Vietnam. Like I have this image in my head of a helicopter on the roof of a building, leaving with throngs of people trying to get on it to be the last person on that helicopter because they know what's going to happen to them the moment that the U.S. leaves. That's what it felt like. And so the sorties and all this other stuff is just to give this kind of false confidence to the Afghan government. Hey, we're not going to leave you. We're not going to leave you. No, but we're leaving.
Yeah.
And you're going to lose. And the catch becomes, what happens to Afghanistan after that? Is it going to be a nation of warlords? Or has the Taliban realized, all right, this is a modern world and we need to adapt? I suspect it's going to be more of that. I could be wrong, but I suspect it's going to be more of that. I don't think you have meaning the moment that you get touched by something outside of your system, meaning you know that there's something larger than tribes. You know that there's something larger than this other stuff.
Yeah.
You know that they're more sophisticated stuff. You have to adapt. And I suspect that they're going to go there, even though it may not be modern in the way that we consider modern. It's probably going to be a hell of a lot more than what they were.
It's like socialism with Chinese characteristics or modernity with Pashtun characteristics, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Adapting, adopting our institutions and adapting to the present time, but, doing it in their own way, that kind of thing.
Exactly. I mean, because if you think about it, you need the ability to interact with other governments. So you need relationships. You need diplomacy. You need the ability to deal with certain things within your country, let's say like keeping the lights on. Like, unless they can do that, they're going to have a short rule.
Well, yeah, moving from being an insurgency, to, and just forget, like, because there are religious connotations and there are weird things, but just take it as, in an abstract sense, forget the Islamism part, but take it as an insurgency. Moving from being a longstanding insurgent force to a state is like a huge jump. And the nature of the organization and the kind, you've got to create bureaucracies in a way that you wouldn't have had to before. And that's a completely different mindset. I'm reminded of business texts. What got you here won't get you there, that kind of thing. It's like transitioning from leadership into management. There are these kind of glib ways you could talk about it or something. But the point is, you've got to change a lot of how you organize the people that you're working with. And suddenly you have a lot more people you need to organize too. They're taking over this territory. Well, they're going to be working with a lot of new people. My point is, and even this in an abstract sense, they're still fighting a war and it's bloody and a lot of people are dying. And so I don't want to jump the gun here. Part of what you were talking for a minute there, and when you came in, you were like, we've been doing a good job of covering this. We saw this coming. And I was thinking to myself, well, didn't everybody? Because a lot of the people we've talked to were like, yep, this is exactly what's happening. But then I'm reminded, looking around in the media maybe a month ago, before the real offensive started by the Taliban, I remember seeing articles, with Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan, how will the Afghan government fare? I remember seeing a couple of headlines that were genuinely uncertain, that didn't give any real answer, and that were just sort of optimistic and loose in tone, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Where they weren't doing the obvious actual thought process. It was like, well, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. So my point is, a lot of the media is actually really crappy at this stuff. They don't really do the most obvious analysis, because this is pretty simple. With us out, there's a big power vacuum. The Afghan government isn't strong enough to stand. The Taliban is going to take over. If you're down, though, I want to take us to a break so you can come in with your soapbox. So I'll do that. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We'll be back in a minute with Jamarl's soapbox, his monologue, and possibly a short back and forth. Be right back.
Fault Lines.
Want to know how international issues fit into local ones and how local issues fit into international ones? With the historical context to tie them together, we're bringing it to you all by any means necessary. Tune in weekdays from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to hear me, Jackie Lukman, alongside my co-host, Sean Blackman. By any means necessary, your guide to connecting the social, political, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host, Shane Stranahan, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. If you guys are in the area, you can catch us on radio at 105.5 FM and 1390 AM. We're also in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you're digging what Shane and I are putting down, whatever platform you consume this content on, give us a like, share that audio or video. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can do so with the chat, the tweet, and of course, You can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. That is 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make the show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. And this is one of those days where I wish I was in the studio because I actually do want to take all comers on this. I've been aggravated by this for over a year, and I think I've told Shane just behind the scenes that something has gone wrong with the left. Something has gone monstrously wrong. You have a bunch of anti-vaxxers who are part of the left now. You have a bunch of people who think Donald Trump won in a landslide. And you have people who basically seem to ignore reality, ignore nuance, screaming as if they came from a pod from a utopia, that there are these things in this perfect world, that if everybody just believed in the exact same thing, that we would be able to accomplish all of these great and pressing things. And while that's true in a weird way, it's stupid in another. You're never going to get everybody to agree with you. And oftentimes, in order to do anything, you need coalitions. And coalitions start to get messy when you start getting around the edges. The catch becomes, what do you want to accomplish? How do you want to accomplish it? And if you're coming from utopia, I lose patience. I was, just because Democrats typically suck, don't necessarily mean they do it as an absolute and constantly. And it also doesn't necessarily mean that good things won't come out, or that you can acknowledge those good things when those good things do come out. Jamal, what are you talking about? So Jeff Stein, reporter, comes out, Washington Post. He says, Bernie Sanders says budget includes child tax benefit, universal pre-K, paid family and medical leave, tuition-free community college, lower prescription drug costs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's another part to this where it goes further. It says the other part, lowering Medicare age, Obama expansion, increasing physical supply, et cetera, et cetera. Now, my response to this was rational. It was basically, when I was a kid, there's a lot of this stuff that would have been very significant for me. The $300 a month would have been almost a fourth of what my mom was bringing home, to put that in context. And from the standpoint of just going beyond the $300 a month, when you get into the community college and you think about the money that you paid for community colleges, you may not think it's Medicare for all. And no, it's not the $15 an hour minimum wage. And no, it's not the Green New Deal. And no, it is not roses coming out of the mailboxes. And it's not roses coming out of guns and this type of stuff. And no, Jesus didn't return. No, it's never going to be all of those things that you want. And no, it's ridiculous. It's a certain degree of idiocy to even believe that everything is going to be everything, meaning that you don't instantiate the wins that you get and continue to move forward with the things that you don't have. That's called life. It's called reality. It's balancing priorities. This is what I want. This is what I need to achieve. This is what I have to get it. Based upon the position that I have, what can I bear? And I'm telling you, as a flat fact, people who try to win a drawn game often lose it, usually lose it. It's one thing to play a position and think to yourself, I can do anything I want in your position. You can believe anything you want. Ideology, is one thing. Reality doesn't care about your ideology. And the fact of the matter is, if you can look at this, what I just named, and you say, oh, dude, that sucks because it's not everything that I want, I think you're insane. I think you've lost the mission. I said, it's funny. There will be YouTubers screaming bloody murder from Utopia about how this is insufficient and Sanders sucks and the squad of sellouts. Whatever is true, several provisions would have had several impacts on me growing up. Also, none would have got through without Sanders. That's a flat fact. It's true. I also made the point, no, it's not Medicare for all or $15 an hour or elimination of student debt, but you still instantiate wins on other issues. A dirt poor kid getting $300 doesn't stop your eviction, but you still should be happy for the 20 million kids that get their $300. The same thing is true for the Medicare expansion. We can have a quibble over what incrementalism means. How many angels do dance on the head of a pin? But I will tell you this, as somebody who's been on Medicare going back since 17, on and off, this was the kidney failure stuff, not having glasses and not having eye care and dental care is significant. It is major. And it's major to a tune or to a degree where tens of millions just go without eye care or go without dental care because they can't afford it. So when somebody is on Twitter responding to what is a completely rational comment. This, they said, imagine how much more would be done if the DNC apologists would stop taking crumbs and pretending it's a whole meal. And it's not funny. Bernie and the squad protect the establishment. Soft progressives protect them. They accept incremental change. These people are idiots. These people are idiots. Meaning, if you're part of the 20, 30 million people that now get eye care coverage, or they would get dental coverage, and let's assuming this passes, you would think this guy is a stone cold idiot, because the guy is a stone cold idiot. Any fool can scream from utopia. Any person can do that. The reality is, what can you get accomplished? And the fact of the matter is, the left screams from utopia but get zero accomplished. You can have this purity contest nonsense stuff, but the reality of it is, there's a certain degree where it's no longer just purity, and it's a thing of, okay, what can we really get done, not what we just theoretically, conceptually grift. That's what it is. And let's be very clear, it's a grift. It takes a grifting, disillusioned, privileged person to write some nonsense like that for their base, when the reality of things is, Joe Biden was never going to give you Medicare for all. And if you were so stupid to believe force the vote was going to give you Medicare for all, that's on you. The real world has real people that has to deal with real things and real issues. And those real issues are often a balancing of priorities. Right here. Joe Biden was never going to give you Medicare for all. Joe Biden was never going to do this kind of magic stuff that you wanted. This is the real world. And you got to deal with the Democratic Party as is. You didn't win. Period. And so me, having no expectations of anything from Joe Biden, look at this and say, hey, if when I was a kid, that would have been dramatic. There's nothing that I said there is false. Now, does that stop me from pushing for Medicare for all? No. Does that stop me from pushing for $15 an hour or screaming bloody murder when I don't get it? No. But am I human and realistic enough and honest enough to acknowledge when something is decent? Yes, I can do that. And apparently many on the left can't. So whatever the reason, and there are many, they've lost the mission. Screaming from utopia is not where I need to be. And I don't care about any of those people. Shane, what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't know what you do with it, though, because those are it's like not the, I don't mean to, the narcissism of small differences thing. I'll use that phrase, but I don't mean it too seriously, but there's like an element of something to it, which is you agree with these people on a lot, but on tactics and on some of the...
That's just it. I don't think I do.
You don't think so?
Because this is different. That's what I mean. Like they don't want to get anything done. Their job is just to grift. They're internet YouTubers. And so they get clicks and they get tweets and all this other stuff. And they get popularity. And they have people saying, oh, God, you're so... I'll put you on... Do you know who A.K. Goodman is?
We talked about him. I never watched him, but yeah, he was formerly a Bernie guy, and then he was like anti-Clinton, and then went pro-Trump, and you told me about him.
Exactly. And he went pro-Trump because the audience basically took him pro-Trump. Anybody who does a YouTube channel, who's honest, what tends to happen is that the people who are the hardest on your, let's say, on your front, meaning in the direction that you're going, tend to try to pull. And on some level, you slightly agree with them in some areas. And so if you're not careful, you can let them pull you. The problem is these people have gone off the cliff. And I understand why. I mean, you've been disillusioned. You've been lied to perpetually by the Democratic Party.
Well, but we've all been there. I feel like there's something more. Yeah. I feel like there's some crux about it or something like that. Like, I'll put it like this. Like, what would it take you to become one of those people, to turn into one of those people? Because a lot of the stuff you were saying, I'm sure they would agree with. You're saying, what did you expect to get done voting Biden into office? A lot of these people that you're talking about didn't vote Biden in, like you were saying that they've been opposed to him.
No, I didn't say that. No, what I said was, what do you expect under Biden? Meaning, did they honestly believe that Biden was going to give them Medicare for all? And if they didn't believe that, because I got to be honest, if they thought that they were going to get Medicare for all under Joe Biden, they've lost their minds. That's what I mean. It's unreality.
Yeah. And I have also seen the insanity. I have also seen the craziness. And so I want to confirm your sense that there's something wrong here. I'm not trying to gaslight you. I'm just saying like I think that there might be more agreement than that is visible to the, from the surface. visible on a surface analysis or whatever. I think that, again, it's like a difference of tactics or a difference of approach or maybe even just a difference of temperament or mood or something like that. What space they're in right now, what the emotional tenor is like in the online communities they've created, where they're willing to go to greater lengths that aggravate their friends to push for these things. Because if you ask what they want, it will sound utopian, sure, but it'll also be basically what you want, a lot of it, That's my point.
No, see, I know you think it's a difference in tact and everything else. Everything is subjective on some level, right? Everything slides into something else. And at some point it becomes emergent of something else. This is something else. It's not the same.
All right.
I'm telling you it's not.
Okay.
I've watched this for years. And the people that I've talked to who were also on the left have noticed the same thing. It's cancerous. I mean, think about it for a moment. I mean, the left being basically anti-vaxxers, believing that Donald Trump won the race in a landslide, believing, I don't know, this Fauci stuff from the right wing. It's very weird and bizarre. And it's like, it's not about getting anything done. It's about burning it all down. That's the difference. I'm okay with burning it down if I don't necessarily think I can get anything necessarily done. By the same token, they are so in unreality that it is bizarre. Like, for example, force to vote. Did force to vote, I'm just asking you, did force to vote ever have a chance to get Medicare for all?
No, and I said so at the time. Yeah. And I was arguing against you on that one, at first at least. It was for the first day or two where that came up, where you were kind of in favor.
But I'm okay with the tactic. I don't see anything wrong with the tactic. But to take that tactic and act as if that's everything is lunacy.
Yeah.
And do you realize people are still talking about it today? Like at the protest.
Oh,
like,
yes.
Cori Bush.
Yeah,
Cori Bush.
That's crazy. No, I think we played that clip together. She was asked about that. Exactly. Why weren't you pushing for it?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. That's what I mean when it's so unreality. This is something like 8 months, had no chance of getting Medicare for all, and they're still talking about it. It's very weird and bizarre.
I hear you. Ultimately, I'm in agreement with this stuff. If it's cool with you, we have a doctor on the line, and there's a lot to talk about here. With the number of number of new cases this morning, it's crazy. 230,000+ cases in a single day. It has been months since we've seen that. 235,099 new COVID cases is the specific number. Months since we've seen that. It was at the peak of the winter cold and flu season. That was the last time we were seeing those kinds of numbers ever. When COVID was at its worst and more people were dying than ever. And it's summer and we're getting back into that mode, despite an extremely high percentage of the population that's been vaccinated. Now, this whole process has been made possible by this Delta variant, or at least that's how it seems, which is breaking through vaccination. People are not they're protected from its worst effects, but they're still able to get the Delta variant of the coronavirus, and they're reportedly still able to spread it. They just die from it at a much, much lower rate, the vaccinated, I mean. This whole situation, though, puts us in a rather precarious perch. What's coming next? Where are we going when we head into the winter this year? To talk about this, to go into some depth on the science, and to give us his medical perspective, we'll be joined on the other side of the break by Dr. Kogan, Dr. Mikhail Kogan, a longtime guest on the show on this topic. We'll also be talking about other things you can do besides just getting vaccinated, besides taking specific medication, things you can do to improve your health. We'll be talking about that again, something we've talked about a few times before, but always worth coming back to with our guest. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We'll be back with Dr. Mikhail Kogan on the other side of this short break. Be right back.
Fault Lines.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik.
Epidemics and pandemics could kill millions of people, and they actually did. Centuries ago, deadly outbreaks called the Black Death, the Plague of Justinian, and the Spanish flu ravaged countries, empires, and whole continents. Some of these diseases are still present around the globe. Others have become a thing of the past. Discover how these ancient and not-so-distant outbreaks from previous centuries differ from modern-day SARS, MERS, and coronavirus pandemics. Listen to our new series, Outbreak, the deadliest epidemics in human history, this week on Radio Sputnik.
Lines.
And we're back. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan, and we are joined on the phone by Dr. Mikhail Kogan. He is the medical director at the George Washington Center for Integrative Medicine, also associate professor of medicine at George Washington University. He's the founder and executive director of the AIM Health Institute. If you live in Washington, D.C., that's a Washington, D.C.-based nonprofit delivering integrative services to the underserved. Go check it out, healthaim.org. That's the URL. And again, that's DC-based. Dr. Kogan, thank you for joining us. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning. It's good to be back.
Good to have you back with us. Always great to talk with you. There's a lot going on right now. I read the numbers just a few minutes ago. I'll read them briefly again. 235,099 new COVID cases reported yesterday. Also 720 new deaths. Now, I looked at a chart because I was like, wait, have we seen that before, the 235 case count? I thought we had, and sure enough, we have. But on not that many days, it was really January, December of this year, or pardon me, January of this year, December, late last year, where we were seeing any numbers like that. And a lot of the days, the numbers were lower than that. The vast majority of days back during that period, in other words, we were having less than 235,000 new cases per day, which puts me in the mind, are we back there already? You know, so much of the population has been vaccinated. We were told that was going to be effectively a panacea, and we led the way on vaccination for quite a while there for a nation of our size. Immense, part of the population got vaccinated, and then it stopped. And right around the same time that we started to talk about it stopping, you also had this Delta variant, which appears to break through vaccines. And while vaccines still protect people from the worst effects of the Delta variant, it seems like people will still circulate it. And in the process, it seems like it will still mutate in them, which puts us in a very bad position because you're going to have new strains mutating, likely breakthrough strains that will still get people sick even though they're vaccinated, that kind of thing. I'll pass it off to you like this, Dr. Kogan. Feel free to please correct anything I said that you disagree with or think that I got wrong there. But also, is this setting us up for a kind of worst case scenario where we've tried with the vaccines and we incentivize the creation of mutated superbugs that are able to break through the vaccines while circulating in both the vaccinated and the unvaccinated population? Because that's something that I've been hearing about. And I wanted to go to you with that one. What's your take on that, Dr. Kogan?
Yeah, so, I think we sort of discussed before that this situation will happen. I think it's happening faster than we thought. My expectations were that we're going to start hitting this peak later, sometime late August, early September. I think, unfortunately, I doubt that this is the top of the peak. I think it's going to get a lot worse. But it also does look like if we're sort of following the model of Delta in India, we're probably going to have this peak a lot shorter than the last one. So we're going to peak and then we're going to start dropping. Regarding the people who vaccinated, so at least for now, it's still more than 90% of patients who get new COVID are not vaccinated. So this is really important to mention. And while Delta did sort of push some people who didn't want to get vaccinated, and we finally crossed the average number in the country, over 50% of patients vaccinated. But, we're not anywhere near numbers that probably need to be done to protect majority of patients with the vaccine, majority of people with the vaccine. So, but you're absolutely correct. So breakthrough occurs. They're all mild, but the sad reality is we were hoping that vaccine will arrest the progression, and it's not seemingly happening. Interestingly, I don't know if you remember, but we talked about this a long time ago. I think it was a year ago when I said, mark my words, we're not going to have herd immunity. I predicted this very accurately, and I was basing it on two things. I knew that we will never get to 80% vaccination rate just because of politics of this country. But bigger issue, I was expecting that the virus will mutate to the point where the vaccines will basically not prevent the spread because of the rate of mutation. So I'm still in the thinking that this spike is going to be relatively short-lived. It will cause deaths, but less deaths than the last one. But we're going to have to get used to this. We're going to have this periodic spikes. I think that while some experts quote, end of pandemic in the next few months, I think it's totally wrong. I think this virus is not going to go anywhere. I think it's going to continue to mutate. You may have heard of the new variant called Lambda that's coming from South America that appears to be just as contagious, although there's very limited data on this. But the problem with the variants, when the new one comes in, the spread of the new variant may potentially be faster if the body has not seen it in. Moreover, there are probably going to be a significant chances of a second or third or whatever reinfection. So think of this in terms of a flu. So annual flu, a lot of people get it. We kind of over the decades gotten used to it. So I think we have to start preparing ourselves, but this is what we're looking at. It's just deadlier and more infectious. It's a lot more infectious and a lot more deadlier than flu. Thank God vaccines, at least for now, seem to be decreasing mortality dramatically. So that's the only thing we sort of can say formally, scientifically shown. The rest is the time will show more studies are needed to kind of address tons of additional questions, such as, for example, should we all be getting boosters in the next few months, right? There's no clarity on that yet. Back to you.
Absolutely.
So what about kids? I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if you were still going. I apologize. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Kogan. As you can hear, I'm sick with something. I don't think it's COVID, but it's something. What about kids? I mean, for the longest time, we've been told that kids are, I guess, less likely to die, less likely to get ill. But it seems that, again, Delta is not necessarily following the typical rules of COVID. How should parents deal with this, especially with their kids going back to school in these high-risk areas?
It's a very good question. What about kids? So I think the teenagers 12 to 17, I think the vaccine is, by the way, also the Pfizer vaccine was just formally FDA approved, not just emergency approved, but formally approved. But so 12 to 17 should be getting vaccine. The kids under, those are the ones that currently vaccine is not approved for. That sort of you asking this a good question as to sort of now what. Well, the problem also that this new variant is a lot more contagious, and there are a lot more kids in the hospitals. I read numbers somewhere that there's about 90,000 kids just in the last couple of weeks who've gotten infected, and mortality is very low, but it's still, kids do get sick, and they do end up in the hospital. And the scary part for me is seeing post-COVID in the clinic, realizing that even mild cases often end up with consequences. I'm not a pediatrician, so I don't see kids, and I don't know what the statistics are, but I'm really scared that we're going to see this whole generation of kids growing up now who are going to have this long-term post-COVID symptoms that are going to have to be managed, and we currently have no really effective treatments outside of what I think is the best, which is nutritional support and kind of treating the underlying subtleties like immune dysregulations, cellular dysfunction, those things. But they're really not well addressed by mainstream medicine. So not a lot of tools there. The kids concerning, there's a loud talk about getting kids between 5 to 12 vaccinated. I have not seen any specific timeline on this as to when they're thinking of approving vaccine. I'm also worried that the acceptance of vaccine in kids is going to be very low. It's kind of hard to say what is there to happen, and partially because, this is the last week we started having kids going back to schools. So kids are now, potentially in a very highly exposed area. A lot of our classrooms are not well ventilated. They may be crammed. There could be a lot of students and the teachers. At least teachers seem to be accepting vaccine very well. Among the teachers in the country, there's over 90% rate of vaccination. But, it's one teacher for a class, right? So you have 20 plus kids in the classroom. And if one gets sick, there's going to be chances that that person can pass it on to majority of the class. And we know with the spread being or contagiosity being that high, we could potentially be looking at the cascading effect in schools. So it's a mess. It's a bad timing for the Delta to show up in terms of the school year. We're going to see, and then we're of course going to see a lot of politics, like the Florida governor saying, no, we're not going to allow mandate for masks in schools. If you do, we're going to stop paying you. There are all kinds of things that basically just making this whole situation much more aggravated and much more anxiety-provoking for everybody. And
just to be clear, you're talking about Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, I'm not seeing a kind of a unified political front saying, look, we got to come up with a very clear guidelines for
nothing fully. No. If anything, it's quite the opposite. Everybody arguing with everybody else on the highest levels. One quick note here. We looked into this. I don't think the Pfizer vaccine, you said a couple of minutes ago that the Pfizer vaccine was fully approved. I see them still pushing for that, but I don't see that anything new on that this morning or recently.
Really? I thought it just happened yesterday or the day before. I was just reading on the news.
I heard you say it, and I was like, "Shoot, did I miss that?" And so I started to look into it. And I'm not saying anything. You might, right now, I don't see that. I just wanted to throw that in real quick. I just wanted to comment on that.
Okay, so maybe what I read is that they're on the path of getting it approved in the next few days.
Totally, yeah. And early this month, that's yeah. It seems like it is right on the precipice right now. I'm going to take us into a break. When we come back, there's this conversation about what the point of the vaccines is now with the Delta variant. And I don't mean it in some existential pulling out my hair sense. Oh, what's the point of them? I mean, we need to, I think, have a clear understanding if we're going to have a conversation about it and know what the other side is talking about. Assuming there is another side on this, and there almost always is, we should know what we're talking about. We should know what we want from the vaccines, what they're supposed to do. And so I want to go into both some of the latest science, especially, how basically how protected you are against the Delta variant. I also want to talk to you about how you talk to your patients about the vaccines, because I'm curious. I know we've talked about before about patients of yours who don't want to get them. I'm curious, people who are on the fence, what you've heard from them about why they don't want to get them, and what you see their point being at this point, basically. If they don't keep you from getting sick, but they keep you from feeling sick, if that makes sense. In other words, if they don't keep you from contracting a pathogen and, having that incubate in your body and spread slightly, but you don't feel any of the symptoms, basically, or you feel very mild ones. I'm just curious how you explain it to folks, how you personally explain it to patients or people who either do or don't want them. Anyway, with that, we're going into our break. We're joined on the line by Dr. Mikhail Kogan, Medical Director at the George Washington Center for Integrative Medicine, founder and Executive Director of the AIM Health Institute. That's based in Washington, D.C. Go check it out at healthaim.org. We'll be coming back with Dr. Kogan in just a minute. Be right back.
Fault lines.
So, Sean, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show By Any Means Necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Fault lines.
And we're back. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We're joined on the line by Dr. Mikhail Kogan. He's the medical director at the George Washington Center for Integrative Medicine. He's associate professor of medicine at George Washington University, and he's the founder and executive director of the AIM Health Institute. That's a Washington, D.C.-based nonprofit delivering integrative services to the underserved. Learn more about it at healthaim.org. And again, Dr. Kogan, thanks for being with us. I want to get right back into this. How do you explain vaccines with vaccines across the board apparently being less protective against the Delta variant? In other words, less protective is completely unclear. It keeps you from feeling sick, but it doesn't keep you from contracting the virus. That seems to be the case. The messaging has been, get the vaccine to protect the people around you, to keep yourself from getting sick, sure, but also kids should get vaccinated, teenagers should get vaccinated, everybody should get vaccinated so we can pursue herd immunity. That had been the message, basically. And that doesn't seem to make sense anymore. But we're not really having a conversation about what the point of vaccines is. It seems like they're personally protective, right? I'm curious, how do you explain why people should, why they shouldn't, whether they're thinking about it however they are? How do you see their point, Dr. Kogan?
Well, we know the mortality before the vaccine was way higher. Like if I'm talking to a person who's in geriatric age, over 65, or let's say over 75, the mortality prior to the vaccine, could be in 10-20% range. And then after the vaccine, it becomes negligent. So, I mean, at the very least, we know we're protecting people from worse outcome. Again, these mild cases are still going to cause long hauler symptoms. And as I said, I knew that eventually there will be a breakthrough cases, and the vaccine is not going to lead us to the herd immunity. So there's not a lot of surprise for me there. It's kind of not the best case scenario, but it's nonetheless not unexpected case scenario. So I think my conversations with patients the only shift had occurred as I used to tell people, look, you're trying to get this vaccine to protect others too. Now we really can't say that. We can only say, look, you're getting this to protect yourself. Try to get the whole household vaccinated if possible. If that happens, then hopefully that everybody in the household are protected against severe illness. Now, the other really good question is this. What % of people who got the vaccine after exposure develop an asymptomatic infection, meaning virus somehow multiplies to a certain degree so that it spreads? I've tried to look for the data. It's not really clear yet. It's definitely occurring. We know that for fact. We do know that asymptomatic infections are pretty common. What we don't know yet as to sort of what is that rate versus sort of a total rate of infectivity at the moment. I think there are more science going to come out in the next few weeks, which actually will be really important because it will help us to understand what additional measures should we be doing. I personally feel strongly there has to be, unfortunately, back to the universal masking mandate in the whole country. I don't think we can easily get out of it. I'm, of course, talking indoors. Especially as the winter getting closer, right? So we're going to have situations where more of us are going to be indoors, at least in the northern part of the country. And, thus the chances of spread's going to increase. We saw what happened last year. Unfortunately, I think that's not in the cards. From how it looks, there's going to be kind of all over political games. Some states are going to adamantly oppose the masking mandates. Some are going to pass them. The reality is this. If you look carefully at what's happening right now in terms of who's actually getting sick and who's kind of propagating severity of population, still unvaccinated. That's the best message I can give to my patients for now. And then, of course, I work on trying to use other methods, trying to about nutrition, better sleep. I'm starting to see kind of a burnout that a lot of patients, a lot of people have been at a high stress level for so long that we're starting to see this kind of long-term suppressive effects of elevated stress. I want to talk about this for a minute or two. So,
Yeah, totally. Let's go into that. Because I wanted to, the moment that you said it, I was going to go there. This kind of, after being in the house for a year and a half, and having all of the, I'll give you a perfect example. My mom, I've been sick for the last week. I caught a virus or flu or something. And, last year has been a rough year for my mom. My grandmother passed. I've been ill most of the year. All this stuff. So it's been very stressful, not to mention being stuck in the house. It's like when people get sick, the relatives can't visit them in the hospital because of the COVID restrictions. And then hospitals sometimes end up lying about it. It's very weird stuff. And it's unfortunate. Not weird, it's unfortunate. And like you said, stress. And that stress shows itself in very weird ways. And yesterday, my mom freaked out. She got very concerned. She didn't see me on the show. And her thing was, all of this stuff is taking place. I remember how last year was, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I guess I'm pointing out, this. Let me ask you this: what do you expect to see from this notion of like a year in, and these guys are still talking about COVID and it's still having all of these deaths and everything else? What do you, as a medical doctor, expect to see going forward from something like this?
Yeah, so let me come back to one thing you were mentioning. Sorry, I interrupted you there for a second. I want to break down to listeners how to think about the stress, because it's sort of like it's a soft topic. And, you talk to your doctor about, they're like, say, well, just find something to do that distresses you or something. The reality, it's not a soft topic. It's actually a critically important point. And I have a strong feeling that a big part of what's happening now is that our immune system as a whole nation is dramatically weakened. So what happens during the kind of acute stress? During the acute stress, we activate all of our resources. So we're able to combat illness and injury or some kind of a stressful input or threat, rather, higher with better efficiency. The problem is that system that's activated and protects us for a period of time has an infinite capacity. It has a finite capacity. If it continues for too long, eventually the cortisol, which is a kind of a main driver of our metabolic machinery, but it's also a main driver of immune system. So if you have too much of cortisol, there's an immune suppressive impact. The problem when it continues for too long, that chronic adaptation of elevated cortisol starts taking a huge toll. A good example is very simple. Imagine you have a bad boss and you just have a bad situation at work for a long time. And then you go on vacation, and everybody knows this. You go on vacation and you get sick the first day on vacation, right? So it's called a vacation viral syndrome. And what happens is because you're finally able to relax and drop and release kind of this chronic stress, you operated on a kind of a pushing cortisol up, so protecting you from a sudden minor viral thing. So suddenly that releases, and then you drop and you get really sick from whatever the virus is circulating around. This is exactly where we are now. A lot of people trying to take vacations. We finally end up in the situations where we say, look, how long can we be like this? We have to find some kind of way for us to manage this. We relax, we let go, and this happens. And the problem is, instead of trying to manage stress chronically, manage it continuously and in a correct way, we have no real good messaging for the public on how to do this on the long term. And the sad reality is, in contrast to not knowing a lot about vaccine and all these new developments, this is something we know really well. We know what we should be doing. We know that the exercise, sleep, meditative practices, body work. Don't forget, if you have friends or if you have a little bit of means, or if your insurance covers massage or acupuncture, the profound stress-releasing methods. And they can be very quick, in contrast to, if you know how to meditate or do some mindfulness, you have to do this continuously. Practices like massage or acupuncture can sort of quickly reset you for a period of time, for lack of better explanation. Otherwise, I have to go into a pretty long explanation here. So, there are lots of techniques that we can be doing. I'm not hearing general public or general political discourse saying, look, we got to put more resources into this because the whole nation's burned out essentially. And, I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame that it's not recognized. Of course, people with less means burned out a lot more because people with more means can simply eventually start figuring out, wait a second, I got to invest into feeling better, and I got to figure out how to get vacation house or whatnot. A lot of the people who don't have those means, they suffer more. And, it translates to a general immunity of the whole population weaker. And I wonder, I truly wonder if significant portion of this explosion is just that.
This is people's bodies basically being disarmed by chronic stress. Unable to adapt, unable to respond, and the coronavirus hitting. Yeah, that's the kind of thought that appeals to me. It's hard to test, and I wonder about it too. And I wonder how much better we'd do if we use this to try to de-stress. But that's hopelessly myopic and even, of course, naive. We got to close out. Dr. Mikhail Kogan, great conversation. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Be back in a minute with headlines and another 2 hours of this morning's show.
listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Fault lines.
Live from the divided states of America, precipitously perched at the edge of this resilient and exploited globe. Welcome to your context friends for the American perspective. In the left corner, I'm your ever vigilant, your indefatigable political analyst, Jamarl Thomas.
And in the independent corner, I'm your political analyst, Shane Stranahan.
And that would strongly imply that you are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Excellent. All right, I'm going to try to do the headlines. And good show so far. Dr. Mikhail Kogan is awesome. I always love him as a guest. In the news, about 235,000.
Jamarl, you cut out. Oh, now you're back.
No, can you hear me?
Now you're back, yeah.
Okay. There were about 720 new deaths. Over the past week, there's been an average of about 124,470 cases per day, an increase of 118% from the average 2 weeks earlier. 50% of the total American public has been fully vaccinated, and 59% of residents have received at least one dose. As of this morning, the coronavirus has infected 36,047,263 people across the United States and has killed 617,314 unfortunate human beings. Last month, Governor Ron DeSantis issued an executive order banning schools from requiring students to wear face masks upon returning to studies. Now, DeSantis has threatened to withhold pay from superintendents and board members who would mandate masks in schools. Basically, he's murdering kids. Let's be clear. According to a new memo by the Secretary of Defense, all military personnel will be required to get the COVID-19 vaccine by September 15th. However, if the vaccine gets FDA approval, the military mandate will go into effect immediately. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, quote, "I will not hesitate to act sooner or recommend a different course to the president if I feel the need to do so. To defend this nation, we need a healthy and ready force," unquote. The 3-day birthday bash for Obama and Martha's Vineyard concluded yesterday. Hundreds of high-profile guests were invited, including John Legend, Chrissy Teigen, Wayne Wade, Tom Hanks, and none of whom, or the rest of the guests, were wearing masks. Over 200 staff were in attendance, including servers and parking attendants or assistants who were required to mask up. The Taliban has been making major advances across Afghanistan as foreign troops withdraw, taking 6 regional capitals since Friday. The Islamist movement has rejected internationalist calls for ceasefire. More than 1,000 civilians have been killed in the past month, and at least 27 children killed in 3 days, the United Nations says. Now the Taliban has their eyes on northern Afghanistan's largest city, Mazar-e-Sharif. If fell, would mean a nearly complete control of northern Afghanistan. Ongoing fires in Greece are the worst natural disaster the country has seen in recent memory. The island of Evia, is currently facing the worst of it. Situated in north of Athens, the capital of the fire. Situated to the north of Athens, the capital, the fire has ravaged the island's forest. The fires are driven by 113. I think that's degree temperature.
Yeah, Fahrenheit temperature.
Yeah. Virginia Giuffre sued Prince Andrew for sexual assault in New York court yesterday. The allegations claimed that Giuffre was, quote, lent out, unquote, by Jeffrey Epstein for underage sex with Duke of York, Prince Andrew. Very interesting. Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko said the country's Olympic sprinter who refused to return home was swayed by the Polish into accusing her handlers of being KGB agents. Lukashenko's own words, quote, "She wouldn't do it to herself. She was manipulated. It was from Japan, from Tokyo. She was contacted by her buddies in Poland. They told her literally, when you come to the airport, run to a Japanese police officer and shout that those who dropped her off at the airport are KGB agents, unquote. That's intense. It's very intense. Reporters from the Australian National University have developed a hydrogel that could be injected into the brain to help repair damage. The formula is injected as a liquid and resolidifies into a solid once into the brain, filling in the gaps, and allows replacement stem cells to transport to injured parts of the brain. The technology is expected to be very influential in the treatment of Parkinson's and other neurological disorders. That is phenomenal. And those are your headlines. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. That's amazing. That's what we should be doing with our time on Earth.
Injecting neurogel, hydrogel into our brains, Jamarl.
Exactly. Right there. That's what we should be doing. No, it's it's like when you're watching something like The Avengers or something, and a person gets injured, and they say, okay, inject them with something, and there's this magic fluid that goes into the body that keeps the person stable until they get to That's that. It's the magic fluid. I mean, like it's like you think of all of these wondrous things we come up with, all of these quirks of technology and this kind of wizardry of physics. And instead, we spend our time making bombs. It's just aggravating when you think about it. For God's sake, this is a gel that is going to be influential in dealing with Parkinson's and some other brain diseases, not to mention injuries. But, we get to it on the side of things. It's on the margins. It's not what we focus on. It's the margins. It's just aggravating. I love hearing stuff like this, though, because I think this is great.
Same.
These people have done amazing things for humanity.
Same. Yeah. I mean, we talk occasionally about shortening lifespan, how in the United States specifically, lifespan continuously rising for decades. And then in the last couple of years, it started to go down again. It'd be very cool if lifespan started to look like one of those hockey stick charts that goes exponential at a certain point or something like that. Because theoretically, if you have medical discoveries, of course, there are plenty of philosophical sides of this, but simply, I think if people lived longer, that would be a better thing. In the same way, and specifically if they had improved health span, not just lifespan, so they were living longer, healthier lives and, maintaining the vitality of your 40s into your hundreds or whatever, that kind of thing. If we could get there, it's like in the same way that very few people think that living past 20 is a bad thing at this point because we consistently do it. We expect to live until we're 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even in some cases. More life is broadly better. And I know that I went to a much larger point, Jamarl, but I agreed. It would be very cool if we would be pursuing these things like much more full-throatedly.
More life is better. Yeah, I don't know if more life is better. Not in our current guidelines. And to be fair, you did postulate if you can be healthy, happy, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't care about that healthy part. Our society isn't built towards health. I mean, for God's sake, we have people who break their bodies working in Amazon as opposed to just developing technology to do the job. Eventually they'll get to it, but only when they get to the point where that technology is less expensive than that human who's breaking themselves. I mean, even football players. Did you see, there's a bodybuilder, Ron Coleman. Ron Coleman had a freakish physique. Ron Coleman is broken up today. Could barely walk and everything else, like these athletes or the jobs. Even schooling and our work life balance doesn't care whether or not we're healthy. They just care that you do the job. It's a difference. I agree with you. In a different society, maybe, but in this society, we don't care about life like that.
I just think the more the better generally, honestly. I mean, things you'd have to adapt, and sure there'd be some downsides, but largely it's like if you ask me, do I want my mom to live, if I had to, in my heart of hearts, forget yourself for a second, but your parents, people you love, your kids, the people you're closest to, forget yourself because it's easy to be self-destructive. But do you want those people to be around for a very long time? Yes. And pretty much.
Not if they're in pain.
Not if they're in pain, but God, why does your mind go there, man? That's not where my mind goes. It's like, okay, but they'd be tortured by this world, so I can't have, no, of course not. No, of course I wouldn't want that.
The reality of things.
No, the reality of things is not torture.
Where
lives are mostly good. You're sick right now. You're not feeling well, and so
I disagree. 1,000% disagree.
okay.
People get sick. People get ill. Babies die. Baby gets cancer. None of that stuff. There's no restraint. There's nothing out there to protect you. You're just there by yourself. That's it. No more, no less. And you create relationships over the course of your life. I wouldn't want my mom to live forever if she's going to be healthy. If she's not, no. Just like me, it's not a self-destructive thing. It's a recognition that at a certain point, your capacity to function and to act in this reality space diminishes. And it diminishes to a certain point where you're no longer you.
Well, let's think this through. Let's think this through for a second. If you're saying, okay, she wouldn't be taken care of, she would be alone, she would be what if we're talking about multiple people, which is what we would be talking about? A lot of people living for a lot longer, where you can be alive, your wife can be alive, your mom can be alive, the extended family network that would care for each other, take care of each other, give people meaning. That comes along with it. That's what I'm talking about. I feel like as a society, and I'm guilty of it too, 100%. Our knee-jerk response is always to be cynical. So no, that can't work. Or no, that's bad. That wouldn't happen. And then it's like, okay, if I live for a long time, but what if your life was hell? What if you were just tortured? What if nobody took care of you and nobody loved you and you were, okay, I get it. That wouldn't be good, but that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay, fair enough. But it's not cynical to postulate that if a person is living a long time, that a person is going to get enfeebled.
Oh, totally.
Ill,
yeah, no,
people are going to die.
And I admittedly explained that away at the beginning.
Reality.
I was like, yeah, just forget about that. Include health span into it, because that is key. You don't want people just become increasingly fragile, decrepit. You don't want to feel 200 years old, but feeling 30 years old at 200 might be cool, especially if you had old friends. And another way of looking at this, and again, this is everybody. It's not just the rich. I'm just taking the dystopian ideas out of people's head. It's not like some rich elitist society where the rich can afford this. It's everybody. Everybody lives for longer. We've got enough resources. We're taking care of this planet, and we're off planet too. Both of those things are true. This is just let's postulate a nice vision for society, and then think maybe we can work towards that in some way if we work hard. If that's the case, people are probably going to care in a different way. If I live for a lot longer than I do right now, in the same way that you'd expect people might pursue more with their lives if they live a bit longer in some sense, because they have not only more time to do it, more experience to build up, more skill to build up, but they also are going to be around to see more of it. It's like, if you're planting a tree for your grandkids or whatever, well, maybe you plant a forest and you get to see the start of it and your grandkids get to see the rest of it. My point is living longer might actually commit us more. It might make life more meaningful. In a really good way. And it's easy to forget that. But I've spieled about that enough.
I don't know if it will make it more meaningful any more than, somebody living 30 years versus somebody living 80 years. That person who's lived 30 years can do some phenomenal stuff at that time. I guess the thing becomes, what's the culture? That's probably going to be more important. Because whatever the ideology is in a lifespan like that, or a world or society like that, that it's going to have to accommodate people doing different things at some point, or not doing different things. Meaning you're going to get a percentage of people who say, I'm just stuck. It's going to be that way for 1,000 years. You're going to have others who flitter all about. I don't know if it makes it more meaningful. I mean, this is kind of like, if you were told that you were just a video game character, does that change what you are? That type of stuff. I don't know if it's that, but I agree with you. It's different. No, I don't know if it's dystopian or not. I don't know. I mean, when I think about stuff like this, I always think of it in terms of what is the world that the people are living into? And oftentimes in our history, we don't have anything showing a situation where the rich aren't the ones who take advantage. I mean, if anything, what will probably happen is Bill Gates will live for, forever. And everybody else, not so much. But again, like you said, it's dystopian. And we're not postulating the dystopian one. I guess this sounds more like Star Trek stuff, where it's humanity worked itself out. They were able to kind of deal with the poverty and the crime and that type of stuff, and it was just kind of a better world. Yeah, in that, I think that's a new world. I don't think it's impossible, by the way.
No, it'd be a lot better. But it's admittedly pie in the sky. I guess it's just useful to orient yourself sometimes. That would be better.
Wait,
and it is possible.
That's what I mean, Shane. I don't think it's pie. I don't think it's pie in the sky. That's what I mean. Like it's and I guess this is what people can call me naive. No, it's a quirk of ideology. I mean, we have right now people who basically just live their lives for profit. because in their heads, that's what they've been taught. That's all they know. And it's a hand-to-mouth thing going back from just, here's a bone, I need to eat, etc. The subsistence, fighting, and everything else. What happens when you transcend that? That's something else. And the thing is, I don't know what's on the other side of that. And so I can't, part of me has this hopeful thing in my head of transcending this kind of emergent thing where, rape is bad and everybody gets it as an ideological level. Will there be 3 or 4 people who don't? Yes. But the overwhelming majority of the public says, yes, that's wrong. It's like where certain things just get accepted as, okay, we've won this. We're moving on to something else. We seem to have an inability to get past anything right now. And I'm curious about what it looks like if we get past something significant. And so I'm not of the mind that it's impossible. I just don't know how to get there.
And maybe you can't even get past it, but that's a topic for another time because we're a little bit over and we got our guest on the line on a completely different topic, one that's also pretty damn severe, and we're going to be getting into. We're talking about violence specifically in Chicago over the weekend, dozens of shootings, over a dozen deaths, bad situation, and it's one that's played out effectively every weekend for what feels like forever. We were getting into conversations within the last week with psychologists and sociologists and child psychologists. We're talking about the effects of poverty, effects of living on these things, what that crime, and I say poverty and crime as if they're 100% coincidental or the same. They're not, of course, but they're so tightly correlated. We're looking at how that cluster works and what it feels like to live in a place where opportunities are scarce. Whatever opportunities there are usually aren't going to get you out of this pit. And the ones that are available are often violent, or at least, involve things that could get you in a lot of trouble, land you in jail. We're turning, to another perspective on this same question, the same problem. On this side of this weekend's shootings, we're going to be speaking with Charles Key about what, from a sort of a law enforcement perspective, he's former lieutenant for the Baltimore Police Department, from his perspective, looking at Chicago, again, from Baltimore, not Chicago, but still looking at it from the outside, what you can do, speaking with the public, speaking with our audience, what he would recommend, and we'll probably tussle a little bit, but I'm very curious to hear what exactly he has to say. Again, Charles Key, former lieutenant for the Baltimore Police Department, when we come back. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We'll be back on the other side of this very short break. Be right back.
Fault Lines. Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com. Fault Lines.
And we're back. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan, and we're joined by Charles Key, former lieutenant for the Baltimore Police Department with over 25 years of experience. For 10 of those years, he served as the commanding officer for firearms training. Charles Key has written the department's policies on use of lethal force and hostage negotiation and is considered an expert witness in criminal trials. Charles, Mr. Key, thank you for joining us this morning. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
Good. Better for having you. Thanks for talking with us. Like I said as we went into the break, constant violence in Chicago that we've been talking about from a sort of a more academic perspective. Even talking with people who are dealing with this on the ground, but like psychologists, sociologists, that kind of thing, specifically looking at the economic impact or the psychological impacts of poverty, material scarcity, and what that does to people with the mindset of like, that's probably what leads people to crime in a lot of these cases. On the other hand, part of the larger conversation about this is you have crime. Well, how do you deal with that? You send police in, you establish law and order, you try to reduce the level of chaos, and by, introducing order to the situation, you give people stability and basically what they need to not constantly be reduced to square one, having things stolen from them, constantly living under threat, economic opportunities constantly fleeing to other communities, those kinds of things. So I hear that case completely, but I wanted to turn to you. Looking at it from the perspective of somebody who's worked in Baltimore for decades, looking at Chicago, arguably one of the most dangerous, crime-ridden cities in our nation, not even arguably the most. How would you try to deal with that?
The thing I think that's happened that is most significant, that is part of the cause of this, is that there has been in the last year or so, since the Floyd incident, the almost unanimous call, if you will, for defunding police, etc. You have, when you're a cop and you go into dangerous situations, you have to have a feeling that you've got that your government, the people you're working for, have your back, and that just doesn't exist. As I read up on the problems in Chicago, I saw that the mayor there had last year proposed, I think it was an $80 million cut in the police budget. So you've got, on the one side, you've got the cops dealing with this surge of violence. On the other side, you have the police officers not feeling that that their city has got their back. So when you start trying to restrict the way police respond, then and you do it from this kind of a social perspective, when you were talking about psychologists, et cetera, that's all good. But at the same time, you've got to let police have the ability to do the work they're supposed to do, which is to stop crime. Or, well, of course, they'll never be able to do it, but from the standpoint of, like the officer, French, and making a car stop on a car that had expired tags. Well, you've got people out there decrying the fact that police officers stop cars at all. They want to have like a traffic unit or something like that, unarmed, that does that sort of thing. The problem is that those kinds of basic police functions, making traffic stops, are not just designed to find somebody that's violating traffic laws. It's that across the board, when individuals that are involved in violent crime, they're also involved in other lesser criminal activities. So that's part of the reason why you have police officers that are their role, or what they're expected to do is to make those kinds of stops, because they often lead, as they did tragically in this case, to criminals that have a more violent background. So you've got this balance that is necessary between supporting the police, holding them accountable when they do something wrong, and once again generating this atmosphere where police are respected instead of the targets from both political and, in the case of violence, the criminal element.
Charles, thank you for joining us. Your point of view on this. I will point out something, though. It's not, I agree that it's a balance. And I agree that the defund the police on some level goes askew, because I think cops are often thrown in to fix issues of society itself that cops honestly can't fix. But it was something that you were saying, though. I mean, let's be clear. The reason that people were calling to defund the police is because police were acting out of hand. I mean, right here, the Justice Department announced, this is back in 2016. I remember this. I was alive during this time. It was Ohio and Baltimore, where they did a civil rights investigation because of the people that were being killed by cops, and killed in a way that seemed to be untoward. The Justice Department announced its findings in 2016 following a thorough investigation at BPD. In 2015, the department found that the Baltimore Police Department made stops, searches, and arrests without required justification, used enforcement strategies that unlawfully subjected African Americans to disproportionate rates of stops, searches, and arrests, used excessive force, retaliated against individuals for their constitutionally protected expression. The pattern of practice resulted from systemic deficiencies that persisted in BDP for many years. I guess what I'm getting at is the calls to defund the police didn't come out of nowhere. It came because people thought the police were acting out of hand. And while I agree with you that, the defund the police thing was askew, because I don't think the issue entirely in and of itself, by itself, was the cops, it just seems like you're putting all of this on defund the police. The issues seem to go further than this. I mean, before the defund the police stuff came out, Chicago was still Chicago.
No, I'm
agree with me.
Fund the police, and that's a good example. Your example about about Baltimore. The fact of it is that, yes, there were those transgressions by the police, and they dealt with it. They dealt with it by having the Department of Justice sign an agreement with the Baltimore Police Department to fix the problems. So they've dealt with it. Now, getting back to the other thing, yes, there's police misconduct. It is so exaggerated from the standpoint of the actual numbers that from the standpoint of police officers, for instance, targeting African Americans, the statistics, and you can go online and find these statistics, is that it's about 0.0004 police officers shooting an individual, and that just doesn't rise to the level of saying that the response to those bad actors is to defund the police. What the response is as they.
Well, I didn't agree. I mean, like I said, I didn't necessarily agree with the premise of defund the police. By the same token, 1,000 people getting killed a year is extraordinary. That's extraordinary. I mean, you could say it's 0.001, and you could laugh, but I'm telling you that number is not seen anywhere else around the world.
It's oh yes, it is. It's not 1,000 people a year killed by police. There is no number anywhere like that. The thing that prompted all of this is that the number of so-called unarmed individuals that are killed by police. But like if you go back to Ferguson, he didn't have a gun, but he weighed 300 pounds. And the scientific evidence indicated that he attacked the officer, none of which started the eventual probe, which they sent 50, 100 FBI agents to try to investigate. The point of it is there is police misconduct, and policemen should be held accountable. They should be held accountable above other citizens given the job that they have. But at the same time, the exaggeration of the number of incidents has fueled this resentment and the feeling that the police are just out there shooting and killing people.
Well, and here's the thing, Charles, I actually agree with you on pretty much all of that. I agree that a lot of this stuff has been overplayed. And at the same time, I believe that police, and this is a case that I was making months ago, I'm forgetting her name, Kimberly Potter, I believe it was the one who meant to pull her taser and accidentally pulled a gun during a routine traffic stop.
Right.
That got bad. The guy tried to drive away. Anyway, she killed him. And she was training a class. That's just the story. Back at the time, I was making this argument, Jamarl, and I was actually arguing with you on this one.
The woman was going to put in prison.
I was saying, yeah, at the very least, this looks like manslaughter. I was saying this looks like manslaughter. I ended up being right. They ended up prosecuting her on that one. But what I was saying at the time also,
it was a mistake. And what did I say? I was like, no, that woman shouldn't go to jail. Yeah. That woman was probably making cookies.
Exactly. My point being, in an interesting way, you and I were on opposite sides from what you might expect. I was saying that she should be, or that I at least expected her to be charged, and you were saying, well, she was an accident. Anyway, I was back at the time. I was saying, police should face a higher standard. So, and yet, Charles Key, with whom we're speaking right now for our audience's sake, speaking with Charles Key, former lieutenant in the Baltimore Police Department. And yet there's qualified immunity. There are these, when police do things that are particularly egregious, and we see it happening, there's this sense that they are exempt from prosecution. Now, clearly that's technically not true, but in a broader sense, isn't it true? What's your take on that?
No, that's what I spend most of my time now doing in my consulting work. The qualified immunity argument applies more in civil or applies in civil cases, and it comes from the Supreme Court. The qualified immunity is that the officer does something that before he does it or she does it, it was not a constitutional violation or a clear constitutional violation. That's what the argument for qualified immunity is. In other words, they are involved in an incident. They take some action which, before they took it, had not been prohibited, or there was no case law. So the qualified immunity, in part, then, is applied because it's at that point uncharted waters. It's not, and when cops are doing, you have to understand that cops stop a car because it's got tags on it that are no longer valid. And all of a sudden, they're involved in a gunfight. That's the way it happens. I'm not saying it happens all the time. Most of what cops do is fairly boring. But that's what they have to deal with. And then they make instantaneous decisions concerning, and that language, by the way, comes from the Supreme Court, that instant split-second decision-making. And their decisions then will either cost them their lives, cost somebody else their lives. It's that kind of job. So that's why that protection is there for the qualified immunity. It does not apply in the criminal cases because you've got cops that are charged, like you were talking about, the manslaughter charge with the officer that mistakenly pulled her pistol instead of her taser, that those kinds of things are part and parcel of the job. So yes, police officers do have the qualified immunity argument that in their kind of job, I think is absolutely necessary. All of these things that have occurred, that when they show the incident down in Georgia, and I think that cop's doing 30 years, where he shoots the individual and then plants the taser on him. It's a couple years ago. I've gotten the name of the case. But those kinds of things, the cops are held accountable. They go to jail. And
but they're not. Because that's assuming they get caught. Like right here, Forbes magazine, from 2013 to 2019, police killed over 7,500 people. 99% of the deaths resulted in no charges. 99%. Now, that would mean that all of those guys were just ace shots. That I never killed a man that didn't deserve it. It's that stuff. Like, I don't have an issue. Just being honest. Like I said, when that case happened, I thought, oh, that's a tragedy. That woman was probably making brownies that morning. She had no clue if she was going to murder a guy or kill a guy later that night. That was my thought. I don't think I'm overtly unfair. I think what I try to point out, though, is that it doesn't seem to be a bad apple. It seemed to be a bad bunch. Whether it's training, whether it's this authority issue stuff, I don't know what it is. And I appreciate you giving your take on this. Because, look, this wasn't really the conversation. The conversation was going to go more so into, like, what are the drivers of, like, the gun violence in these states, whether it's Baltimore or Chicago.
But how do you respond to it, too? How do you respond to it? How are you supposed to actually deal with it? Because we talked about, talked.
And that's a really good question. How do you, and maybe let's go there. How should we respond to that? Let's pretend for the moment that the defund the police stuff didn't come. Let's say it's Chicago pre-COVID, or Baltimore pre-COVID. How does these communities supposed to extricate themselves from the situation that they seem to be in, if that makes sense? And I hope that question makes sense. Like, how do they pull themselves out of this violence, or how does this violence stop? And maybe it's not them doing it. Maybe it's something else. But whatever you're thinking of, like if you had a magic wand, what would the solution be?
Communities have to work with the police departments. They can't be at each other's throats. They've got to support their cops. We'll go back to your Forbes study. There is no study that indicates the facts and circumstances of each of the cases. And so you don't have a percentage you can look at and say, well, cops killed X number of people and 99% of them weren't charged, because it means nothing. In the end, you look at each of the cases, which is what's done by different, by the way, not the police departments themselves, but by state's attorneys, a completely different unit. And what I mean by that is that so it's not the police saying we didn't do anything wrong. It's the courts saying that. It's the state's attorneys saying that. And in most civil cases, you find that the juries will find for police. The fact of it is that you've got to get back to a basic strategy of communities working with the police, both in trying to stem the causes of violence, which the police should be actively involved in outside of just the law enforcement role of arresting bad guys, and from the standpoint of supporting the cops. And if they don't, that's why I talked about defund the police. The response to an increase in violent crime is to have less police and have less police action. That's
Charles, I appreciate what you're saying. I don't entirely disagree with the community, or the community need to work with cops, but I still think you keep underestimating the significance of somebody being killed by a cop. And I'm sorry, 1,000 does mean something, because even if you say 50% were clean, were correct, and to say that, well, they didn't charge them and everything else, well, courts and cops, these guys have relationships with one another, and cops do lie for one another. I don't know. This conversation is wild to me. I agree with you that communities need to work with cops. Fair enough. And support to police is purely dependent upon how the police behave in the communities. It's not distinct. I mean, do you understand that, or do you agree with that even?
I'm sorry, I missed that last part.
Like, so for example, when I call the cops, I want to be able to call the cops. I want to be able to call and know that the cop is going to come to my house and not injure me or somebody else that's out in the neighborhood when the cop flips out because of something that they didn't necessarily like or they didn't believe in, and then have a partner basically back the cop up. And look, and this is not just cops, doctors do the same thing. So nurses will back up doctors and all this other stuff. And so all of these people are part of the justice system. So it's not that part.
I mean, it's basically, it sounds, Jamarl, we've had these conversations, and I think I understand where you're coming from enough where I can kind of come in for a second. It's like you would, and specifically talking with your mom, interestingly enough, you told me if you talk to your mom, she's like, she doesn't buy the whole defund the police thing. She likes, she wants to trust the police broadly. She wants to live in a place and live with police that she can trust, that she can call if something's going wrong. And it sounds, Charles, like the situation is a lot of people simply don't trust the police. And I believe that you believe that that's because this has been played up in the media. It's been, people have lied about the actual severity of police committing crimes. They've made the police out to be bad people. But isn't it the case? And this is we've had conversations with guests, including former police, who say the bunch is rotten, who say there is systematic corruption. Police will come in to protect each other. Yes, there are good police, but as an institution, it tends to select for people who have, certain dispositions, that kind of thing. There's this general language, and I don't know what the facts are. There's no statistical thing I can look at to solve this one for me. Are police good or are police bad? Charles, what's your take, former police?
The institution of police in this country is professional. There is no institution of corruption. I'm not saying corruption doesn't exist. It certainly does. That was part of what I did in the Baltimore Police Department, the intelligence unit, was investigate corruption. And the fact of it is, though, your ordinary everyday cop goes on the street is as professional as the police can be in any country. And I'm familiar with other countries and how their police operate. The idea that there is some sort of institutional failure by police departments is just absurd. It is required that cops be held accountable. They have, and just so you know, I've testified for the Department of Justice in putting cops in jail. I have no problem with that. What I have a problem is to blame all of the police officers for what is actually the actions of a few. And to get back to this, the idea that cops protect themselves or, will protect each other. Yeah, that was true. That was true when I started in the police department because it's a long time ago. But it's no longer true. I see cases all over the country where the police officers are the first one to step up and say, this is wrong. You shouldn't do this. And will follow through in either giving testimony or statements, because the other thing that has occurred is you're now, that from some years ago, decades ago, they're holding police officers accountable for not being forthright, for trying to cover up. The New Orleans shootings, that I testified in, the cops down there were held accountable for trying to cover up for the other cops. They went to jail. So the idea that somehow just across the country you have this police structure that is both crooked, lazy, whatever else you want to apply to them. These people are professionals. As professionals.
Charles, I never used any of these words.
But
I never used lazy. I don't think I said.
I didn't say you.
Corrupt.
I'm sorry. That's other people have said that cops they don't.
No. I understand.
They're just taking money.
I mean, I do try to be fair. I don't try to be ridiculous about it. I think to me, a thing that brought this conversation up was when that 13-year-old kid got killed in Chicago.
Adam Toledo.
And the kid had a gun. Yeah, to Adam Toledo. And I thought to myself, why does that kid have a gun? That was my thought. It was like, yes, it's bad the cop shot him. It was a split-second choice. But why does the kid have a gun? And that's the part that bothered me, I think, the most out of all of it. From your standpoint, why does that kid have a gun?
My standpoint?
Yeah.
I didn't know you were directed to. No,
oh no, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry, Charles. Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is, why does that kid have a gun? Why does that? Meaning, what is it about that space in that society that kid has a gun, and how does cops have something to do with it in a way that prevents that kid from getting that gun? Because to me, it's that the cop part seems to come in at the end of the process, but it seems to be something is missing to stop that kid from getting that gun in the first place.
Well,
and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe cops do have a part of that.
Recall,
but please, I'm curious what your take.
It was a pellet gun, and which they make to look like real guns. I've seen in my business, I've seen probably a dozen of those where some 13, 14-year-old kid is pointing what, to all appearances, no matter what your experience is with firearms, a real gun. And then it turns out it's a pellet gun or it's one of those little airsoft things. And there is no way to answer that question, why the parent then allows that child to go out with with a weapon that looks exactly like a firearm.
Oh, I think so another way of looking at this, because with Adam Toledo, it might have been a real gun. I think it was a real gun. I was trying to figure out on the fly if it was a pellet gun. I can't. But take for a second the idea it's a real gun, which I think is really what Jamarl's getting at. From the police's perspective, you're dealing with a community that has already gotten to that point. Yep. So, like, from your perspective, do you have a role in keeping it from getting to that point? In other words, everything that leads up to the crime, whether it's the economic situation they're living in or the social situation, relationships they have with each other. I'm talking before the crime happens. What's your perspective on that whole process? What role do you have in keeping it from getting there? Charles.
The police have a role in that, other than, again, if they're working with the community, they can have input. But it's a parent's choice to allow a child to have, in this case, if it was a real gun, that it's the parent's choice or the person that's taking care of the child that makes that kind of choice. The police can do nothing about that. Have to have from society. There's got to be an understanding that there are consequences to allowing your child out with what appears to be a real gun, or worse, a real gun, and the police can't affect that.
You get the feeling, though, that no parent allows their kid out with a real gun.
Well,
it's not. It doesn't make sense.
I don't think really do. That's
really
the problem. I mean, they're not. When you call them a parent, they're not providing the supervision they should. But in some cases, they absolutely are.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that.
Are they doing that because they feel like they need to protect their kid? Like, what's the motivation behind that? I'm just curious.
Well, there's different motivations. It depends on. If you're talking about a family where the family is actually operating as a family, you don't see that. But you get back into your discussions with your psychologist and all of the problems having to do with the economy, or problems with people not having or ability to have the things that other people have. Those are all factors. There's nothing the police can do to control that. That has to come back to a societal change, and we've just gotten to the position where there are, unfortunately, family types that they're criminals. So,
Charles, and that's what I think is the most unfortunate about it, because I think they throw cops in basically to solve that stuff. It's kind of like if I send a kid to school, the teacher is there to teach. The teacher is there not to, raise that kid. It's a different thing, and it goes to skill. Charles, I really appreciate you having this conversation with me, though. I mean, going forward, what needs to happen, just from your take, from your point of view?
What needs to happen is that there has to be a sea change. That the political influence that has given rise to these kinds of either defund the police and or, we're going to put our money with like welfare workers or whatever, that has to have a sea change. The only way to keep and control and keep the population safe is to have a good working relationship with police departments, not defund them, spend time training, hold them accountable. I have been in favor, for instance, for years of having a civilian involved in the review process for uses of force, as long as the training was provided, as police officers are trained, why they do what they do under the circumstances. So the sea change has to be a complete, abrupt about-face where the political establishment is supporting their cops and at the same time putting the resources in to make sure that you don't make mistakes like reaching for your gun instead of and grabbing your gun instead of a taser. Those kinds of things are training issues. They can be dealt with. It's not cheap. But this constant back and forth now that you hear that, they're going to, they want to fire X number of cops because they want to cut their budget. And then they find, like Minneapolis, their homicide rate goes through the ceiling. It's the one thing that has to occur is that the support for the police has got to come from the political base structure within which they work. And once that occurs and you hold police officers accountable, you put this stuff out in public. I absolutely agree with the focus that is on a police officer's use of force. What I disagree with is, as you indicated earlier, that it is greatly exaggerated, and instead having a conversation where real numbers, real incidents, and having that relationship between that kind of positive relationship between the police and the community.
We're going to close it here. Charles Key, extensive answer. Thank you for joining us. Good conversation.
All right, sir. You have a good day.
You too. Have a great day. That was Charles Key, former lieutenant for the Baltimore Police Department, over 25 years of experience there. For 10 of those years, he served as the commanding officer for firearms training. He has written the department's policies on use of lethal force and hostage negotiation, and he is considered an expert witness in criminal trials. And we're talking about some of the consulting there for a minute, too. I'm going to take us into our break, of course. We're coming back, taking your calls. 202-521-1320 is the phone number. Again, that's 202-521-1320. Call in about whatever you'd like, but of course, we just had that extensive conversation. I'm sure many of you have thoughts about it. Feel free to call in now with them, 202-521-1320. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Be right back on the other side of the short break.
Fault Lines.
They're bringing drugs. They're bringing crime.
I like beer. Yeah, we drank beer.
Whoever's in charge, and I want to record it.
Talk about that.
Discussing all the controversies and news across the disunited states of America. Tune in to Fault Lines every weekday from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern, only on Radio Sputnik.
Fault Lines.
And we're back, and we're taking your calls. Also a new promo there. Jamarl, did you hear that? He may have stepped away for a second.
I did hear that. I did hear that. I'm sorry. I was sitting here typing. Awesome. Great job on the promo.
Totally. I always have like one of my ears off on my headphones, and so it might have been panned. I want to listen to it again. There was a part of it that was like, wait, that didn't sound right. But I didn't have both my ears on. I want to listen to it again. It sounded good from what I heard.
Right. No, I thought it sounded good. Yeah, I thought it was good.
202-521-1320 is the phone number. Again, 202-521-1320. Let's go to Malik calling in from D.C. Malik, you're on. What's going on?
Hey there, guys. And of course, I'm calling to respond to your guest there. Very succinctly, I think your guest. I think, obviously, he's a professional and lifetime law enforcement person, and clearly, he has a clear bias towards law enforcement, and that's fine. You know, that's what he does. But clearly, he's someone that's out of touch and has a clear and obvious bias, because much of what he was saying was patently insane. I mean, you have a long history of law enforcement themselves who have defected and written books and are on the lecture circuit right now. Frank Serpico is the least of them. So clearly, there is deep rot within law enforcement in this country. There's deep rot within the PBA. It's a corrupt organization. I even call it a terrorist organization, to be quite honest, because I think it's been thoroughly infiltrated by various forms of white supremacist fraternal orders and whatnot. But, you know, my background is organizing in police terrorism, and what I think has been left out of the conversation, and even here on Sputnik in the past few weeks, in terms of what's going on in the African community, is rarely is the black working class or organizers from among the black working class asked what the issue is. And many of us have organized in the African community for years. Some of us are former gang members.
I think just last week we had somebody on working as a local organizer from Chicago.
Yeah, we did.
Right.
I did. Because, like I said, this has been something we've been talking about for a while. But you tell us, Malik. I mean, what your take?
Malik.
Malik, I'm sorry. What's the...
It's all good, brother. It's all good. Listen, my position...
I have a friend of mine named Malik. That's where it was coming from.
I think...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. My position is this, and I think many folks who... You know, I grew up in Central Harlem, very, very similar communities to, you know, the communities in Chicago. And I go back to New York City and I go back to Harlem quite often. And the truth of the matter is that this, you know, for people to be discussing what's going on in Chicago and other cities and leave out the destruction of the black political structure, which was a concerted effort by the U.S. government and law enforcement. And if people, and this is a thing that really bugs me, man, about today's left, and particularly the progressive left. I think there is just a strong sense of naivete and also a disconnectedness from the communities that often are being spoken of. Because to be quite honest, there's a class divide. And I've seen it quite often going back and dealing with the current crop of younger organizers who refer to themselves as progressives. They don't use terms like revolutionary because, you know, and again, that is a class divide. You know, I grew up as a dirt poor kid. So when I got into political organizing, it wasn't, you know, I didn't come into political organizing through a college campus. I got into political organizing because it was about survival. And because I was dealing with issues that people are currently talking about now. But a lot of this stuff that's being dealt with, man, this is by design. And you have former gang members who will tell you very strange stories about how firearms end up in the black community. And I'm not saying that there hasn't been a pipeline from the South to northern cities of law enforcement and their young guys who are bringing those guns in. But you got to be really insane to think that the level of death and destruction that is taking place, particularly in Chicago, that law enforcement is unaware of how those guns are getting in there. You know, and real quick, and I'll let this go. I know you guys got callers. When I was with the Black Panther Collective in New York, one of the things that we did is we brokered a gang truce between the Bloods, Latin Kings, and Nietas. And what will often happen when we're brokering those deals and those gang truces is that law enforcement will try to either they will try to force themselves to be involved, or they will try to derail the process. Because the truth of the matter is, and I'll also touch on this, which we'll get into kind of conspiracy theory, crazy territory. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of the leadership within gangs have a connection to law enforcement. And the truth of the matter is, the young men who are involved in gangs often want peace. The leadership often does not want peace because there's no money in peace. There's no drug money, there's no prostitution money, and there's no firearms money.
Well, that would be true whether they're police or not. That would be true whether they're working with law enforcement or whether they're just in charge. I mean, broadly, the lower, you got to convince people to want to die, to make you money or to give you power or whatever. So, but I'm not saying there's nothing there. And what I know is it would be an absolutely fascinating conversation, Jamarl, if like we had a panel with, on the one hand, somebody sort of acting in the capacity of Charles Key, and on the other hand, somebody's bringing up a lot of the stuff that Malik is talking about. It would be a very interesting back and forth. Just putting that in as a note.
I think he's right. I mean, I think Malik's right on some level.
Well, and that's the conversation that I feel like you need to have.
The context of it is like, yeah.
Especially, I feel like that's a conversation you need to have. I'm sorry for cutting in, but you know, just a little bit over talking there. But after last year's Black Lives Matter protest, and think about like the Fred Hampton movie that came out. The Fred Hampton movie that came out. Like, I feel like that would be a very interesting conversation. You know, you're looking, it's like almost as a host, you're looking for, okay, what are the interesting conversations to have? What sides haven't come into contact in a way that they really should, that would be really good to have happen? You know, it would not just make sparks fly, but like give some light as well as some heat, maybe shed some actual insight into what's real here. And that, you know, I can see that being very interesting.
Well, and I thought, and honestly, Malik may greatly disagree with Charles, and I think I do too. But it's good to hear Charles' point, right? I mean, like, it's important to get that side, at least from my point of view.
Yeah.
Especially to push against it and figure out, okay, what is his thinking from the standpoint of the police departments? And, you know, basically, there's no spoon. That's what you guys think about. It's a big deal. It's not a big deal.
Hey, wait, Jamarl, we got another caller.
Yeah, let's go to another call.
This may be a first-time call. May not, but I recognize his name anyway. We have Dara calling in from, I believe it's Pennsylvania. Dara, you're on. What's going on?
Morning. Thank you, Shane and Jamarl, for taking my call. Yes, I lurked in the chat. And just to follow up on some of the things that Malik talked about, first of all, the program recommendation, Charles Key and Garland Nixon, former officer, would be a great conversation. Malik mentioned this being a part of the design. I wholeheartedly agree, and baked into that is the war on drugs. I mean, we all know what Lee Atwater stated as the goal of the Southern strategy. I believe the war on drugs was the policing part of that strategy, whereby, you know, we flood, the government floods certain areas with certain things, and that gives them just cause to go in and bust people for those things. So the war on drugs is disproportionately out-resourced. It gives cause to harass people. Now that we see white people suffering through the opioid epidemic, we now acknowledge it's a health crisis. So we need to get back to dealing with that accordingly. And I sort of made a joke. If you want to see something, I made the joke earlier in the chat. If you want to see them do something about the gangs, because I grew up in the hood. Nobody wants gangs there. Nobody wants violence. But you know, you speak out too harshly, you will isolate yourself and be confronted. So, no, you know, it's a misnomer that the neighborhood is protecting the criminal element. That's not a part of our culture. We want that element going. We want our kids access to education.
But if you start to speak out against the gangs too much, they'll know who's doing it, and they might come after you. That kind of thing. And yeah, it's brutal to even think about. But thank you for the call, Dara. Really appreciate it. We're going to close this hour out. Good hour, good conversations. We're coming back in a minute with headlines and the last hour of this morning show. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan, speaking with Ted Rall. Next hour, be back in just a minute with headlines.
listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Fault lines.
Live from across the divided states of America, it is time now for our last hour this morning of the most disruptive show covering news, politics, and events from across these corners of these disunited states we call America, and from across the increasingly divided surface of our globe. In the independent corner, I'm your political analyst, Shane Stranahan.
And in the left corner, I am the indefatigable, your political analyst, last man on the ball, Jamarl Thomas.
And together that means you're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Too much talk of corners, Jamarl. It threw me off. And I'll be honest, when it was just me,
I was like, wait a minute, that's not right.
It's not right, exactly. And when it was just me on the air, I was like, wait, what even is a corner? How can you have, if there's only one corner, that's just like an angle, if that makes sense. Like, you need more than one corner for there to be a room with corners, and it didn't. I was having an existential crisis there for a minute. There was radio silence for a solid half hour the other day while I just tried to figure that out. A good thing you weren't here for that, Jamarl. I kid.
Yeah, I'm glad I wasn't there for that one. That would have been rough.
It would have been rough.
It's like, welcome to the show.
Exactly.
He's speaking on air.
Why the hell is he taking time talking about it now? Let's get into headlines. First up, in COVID news, there were about 235,000 new COVID cases reported in the United States yesterday. Also, about 720 new deaths. 235,000 new cases in a single day is a lot. We haven't seen that many new cases in a single day since early January of this year, late December of last year. In other words, since the peak of the cold flu COVID season over this recent winter, and we're seeing them again now. Bad deal. Over the past week, there have been an average of about 124,000 cases per day. That's an increase of 118% from the average 2 weeks earlier. 50% of the total American public has been fully vaccinated, and 59% of residents have received at least one dose. As of this morning, the coronavirus has infected about 36,047,000 people across the United States and killed just over 617,300 people across the U.S. I'll put it like this, Jamarl. We've had more than double. It's been weeks, I think months at this point, since we've had cases that weren't doubling every 2 weeks, more than doubling every 2 weeks. It's been, like 100. Today's 118%. It's like that, or 120, or 110, or 150. 100%, to be clear, is doubling. If you have 100% more than you did 2 weeks ago, you have exactly twice the amount that you did 2 weeks ago, of course. Anyway, I say all that to say 235,000. If we have a doubling of that in 2 weeks, then we will be up to 470,000, and we will be like, those skyscrapers in Dubai, we'll be in a brand new peak. Really, really tall, sharp, steep peak of COVID cases, which is sadly, statistically, where the trends are, have revealed themselves to be pointing. That's where they're going. This comes as last month, Governor Ron DeSantis issued an executive order banning schools from requiring students to wear a face mask upon returning to studies. Now, DeSantis has threatened to withhold pay from superintendents and board members who would mandate the masks in schools. In national news, according to a new memo by the Secretary of Defense, all military personnel will be required to get the COVID-19 vaccine by September 15th. However, if the vaccine gets FDA approval, the military mandate will go into effect immediately. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin stated, quote, "I will not hesitate to act sooner or recommend a different course to the president if I feel the need to do so. To defend this nation, we need a healthy and ready force," end quote. The 3-day birthday bash for Barack Obama in Martha's Vineyard concluded yesterday. Hundreds of high-profile guests were invited, including John Legend, Chrissy Teigen, Dwayne Wade, and Tom Hanks, none of whom or the rest of the guests were required to wear masks. You can assume that some did, but from videos that have been leaked, not everybody, certainly not many. Over 200 staff were in attendance, including servers and parking assistants who were required to mask up. Now, this is the other interesting side of this, or one of the other interesting sides of this. The staff is required to put masks on. Okay, so the workers have to put masks on, but all the rich celebrities, they can see each other's faces. They, I guess magically by their wealth, they're less likely to get sick. They're less likely to spread COVID. I don't know exactly the biological math on that one. But regardless, we'll come back to it in just a couple of minutes with Ted Rall. In international news, the Taliban have been making major advances across Afghanistan as foreign troops withdraw. They've taken 6 regional capitals since Friday, this past Friday, over the weekend. The Islamist movement has so far rejected calls for a ceasefire. More than 1,000 civilians have been killed over the past month. At least 27 children were killed over the course of just 3 days, according to the United Nations. Now the Taliban has their eyes on northern Afghanistan's largest city, Mazar-e-Sharif. If that city falls, that would mean nearly complete control of the north of Afghanistan for the Taliban. In Greece, ongoing fires are the worst natural disaster the country has in recent memory. The island of Evia is currently facing the worst of those fires. Situated to the north of Athens, the capital, the fire has ravaged the island's forests. The fires are driven by 113-degree temperatures. And of course, that is Fahrenheit. It is not Celsius. If it were, they would be like everything would be on fire, be melting. Virginia Giuffre sued Prince Andrew for sexual abuse in a New York court yesterday. The allegations claim that Giuffre was lent out, quote unquote, by Jeffrey Epstein for underage sex with the Duke of York. And again, big development in the Epstein case. Epstein may be dead, but this story is not. It has legs. He had a network. That's, of course, why he's, at least part of why he's infamous, is that, you know, he was bringing people over, allegedly getting a lot of them to have sex with underage women and often really girls. When you're talking about underage women, you're often talking about girls. Clearly, like, horrible morally. But he was doing this in order to get blackmail on people. And whoever he was, you know, we can assume doing that with, well, many of those people are still alive. Now, Prince Andrew is one of the higher profile cases. He hadn't been directly involved in legal scandals, but he's had some embarrassing moments and weird gaffes where if you watched, specifically a while back, I think it was Katie Couric who interviewed him. He did a fairly high profile interview, and he just did not perform at all well. I was watching that a while back, you know, going back over and watching it. Anyway, there was also this high profile, there was this photo that came out with like Prince Andrew and Virginia Roberts Giuffre together at a young age, and his arm is around her in a sort of possessive and you can assume a sexual manner. He has denied the veracity of that, you know, the legitimacy of that photograph. He said that it's been doctored, that it was photoshopped, something like that. This is a big development, and he is arguably, you know, I guess Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, there are a couple other people. He's one of the highest profile people to be associated with Epstein, and this is, we'll see where this goes. Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko said the country's Olympic sprinter who refused to return home was swayed by the Polish into accusing her handlers of being KGB agents. I'll just quote him in Lukashenko's own words, quote, "She wouldn't do it herself. She was manipulated. It was from Japan, from Tokyo, that she contacted her buddies in Poland. They told her, literally, when you come to the airport, run to a Japanese police officer and shout that those who dropped her off at the airport are KGB agents," end quote. I want to look into this one more, and it might be worth following up on in a little bit. This Belarusian sprinter incident with the Olympics it's just interesting. It's one of those weird, it's like a, you know, in its own way, it's kind of a minor incident, but Lukashenko, known as like the last dictator in Europe, the fact that this is happening, right, it's just interesting. And I want to come back, even just factually, that, you know, whether his narrative of events here, why would they do that? Why would they want her to say that they're KGB agents? We can come back on that in a minute, Jamarl. Last headline here. In Earth and Science News, researchers from Australian National University have developed a hydrogel that can be injected into the brain and help repair damage. The formula is injected as a liquid and resolidifies into a solid once in the brain, filling in gaps. Also would allow for replacement stem cells to be transported to the injured parts of the brain. The technology is expected to be very influential in the treatment of Parkinson's and other neurological disorders. And with those are our headlines. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Coming back, there's a bunch of stuff to talk about here, but I've been reading this headline. We've been talking about this in headlines, but, you know, not really outside of them. The sprinter, like Kristina Tsimanouskaya or something like that. I need to look up her name real quick. But yeah, Kristina Tsimanouskaya, my producer's giving me the heads up, tries to flee the Olympics. The Belarusian government is, you know, pressuring her family, her parents, her husband. Her husband flees to Ukraine, I hear. Then her parents are, it's like, if you can't get her back into the country, you're really going to be in trouble. And you imagine, who knows how old her parents are. It's just a weird situation. Any thoughts on that, Jamarl?
It is a very weird situation. I got to be honest, I'm not quite sure. I don't know enough about it yet. I need to see more developments from this story. I mean, KGB saying we're KGB agents, all that stuff is just very strange. I need to know the details. Like, because right now, all I get is Lukashenko's take.
Yes.
And I get this wild story. I mean, just to reread it. She wouldn't do it to herself. She was manipulated. It was from Japan, from Tokyo. That she contacted her buddies in Poland. They told her literally, when you come out the airport, run to a Japanese officer and shout that those dropped you off of KGB agents. That's some insane stuff.
Yes.
I mean, doesn't make it false. Doesn't make it true either. And I don't know which. I mean, if somebody wanted to get themselves out of a country, would they go through extreme measures? Yes. Does it take somebody else to influence them? Not necessarily, no. Is it possible? Yes. So it's like there's a lot of possibilities here, but I don't know how those factor into a picture of the world, if that makes sense.
I don't know either. A quick heads up for tomorrow. I don't want to jinx us, but we have the confirmation and we expect to speak with him. We're planning on talking with John Kiriakou at 7:30 tomorrow, who I believe is currently in Greece. At least when I said, hey, you're in Greece, he didn't say, no, I'm not. So I'm pretty sure that means he's there. We're going to be talking about the fires there. We had a conversation with Peter Oliver about this yesterday, but like major natural disaster. And just, again, it's like if you look on a map, you'll see the island of Via. It almost doesn't look like an island. It looks like it's part of the continental Balkans or whatever. It's right to the north of Athens, right to the north of the capital. And just massive fire. So looking forward to talking with him.
Yeah, that should be good. John is always a good guy to talk about. In Greece, yeah, he should know. He knows that like the back of his head. It's so weird. It's like all of this stuff, be it fires, floods, it was like natural disasters, especially hitting Europe.
Yes.
Because we were just talking about the floods in Germany from Peter Oliver.
We were. There were the floods, and then there was the chemical factory that exploded, went up in fire basically. It was really a fire, it wasn't explosions, but like was leaking a bunch of chemicals, and they were trying to figure out exactly how many there were, thousands of different chemicals. Anyway, in the course of just a couple of weeks, we talked to him about all this stuff. A lot going on over there. And arguably, the flooding and the fire specifically, those are related to climate change. At least that's, we're going to relate them to it,
By the way, the Virginia Goose Free thing, do you think anything is going to come of this? Prince Andrew, because I saw this morning, the first thing when I got up this morning, about the New York court, where she basically is suing Prince Andrew. I guess the Prince Andrew would have to be in the States for that to take effect.
Yeah,
I would imagine.
Yeah, and you can, I guess, Prince Andrew's probably among the least protected of the royal family that we think of as the royal family. Right up there with Meghan Markle, arguably. But at the same time, he's still part of the royal family. I don't see him actually facing like direct legal repercussions. I don't see him going to jail over this. But I'm very curious to see what comes out as a result of the lawsuit and, subpoenas and everything they're going to have to procure to make their case.
And by the way, this is going to piggyback on Ghislaine Maxwell's case.
Oh, yeah.
Which is still going on.
Oh, yeah.
That's assuming she doesn't get out over some kind of Bill Cosby explanation of things.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? If Cosby walks and then she walks on the Cosby defense?
That it would be truly bizarre, that kind of thing. Yeah, the prosecutors went too far. That kind of case. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yes, that would be extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, but look, our legal system is such. I am curious about. I do want them to investigate this though. I mean, the whole point of having Epstein alive was not necessarily and entirely by itself to put Epstein in prison. It's to figure out what's the network that Epstein has basically developed, where it seems like he was having sex with kids. And so it's like when Epstein died, it's like, all right, got this other person, got to keep her alive.
Yeah.
But the catch becomes, how much does she know in comparison to Epstein? All that stuff comes into factor.
You'd think a lot.
No, losing Epstein was a deal.
You'd think she would know a lot, which is part of, I don't know, it feels kind of weird to me. If this were, let's look at the available evidence for a second. There was clearly a high-level operation here involving prominent politicians, business leaders, scientists, thinkers from around the world, prominent people, really important people. High-profile operation. shows a lot of signs of an intelligence community project. We don't know from which country, whatever, but just look at the facts available on the ground. Big blackmail operation. This warrants some attention, right? This warrants some investigation. You can imagine the FBI being like, hey, let's look into this. Why aren't we hearing anything about conversations with Ghislaine Maxwell? Why aren't we hearing anything about any progress on that investigation? Why is there literally, man, maybe we just wouldn't be, but I'm not hearing literally, there hasn't been anything. And now, for people who think this was Israel or think the United States government knew about it, you're probably looking at me going like, dude, they're not going to investigate this. Where you have your head in the sand, and maybe, but it's worth asking in any event, right? What do you think, Jamarl?
Of course, it's worth asking. I mean, because it's the difference between something overt versus something implicit.
Yes.
And yes, there may be all sorts of things that may take place undercover where you just know, okay. Like, for example, I'll give you one. Nobody expected Epstein to make it alive to trial. Nobody. I knew of nobody that thought Epstein was going to walk into that courtroom alive. Drag him in dead like, they had Bernie's. But he's not coming in alive.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, you have all of these quirks, coincidences, accidents. And Epstein loses his life after, offing himself twice, apparently. The first time, he did it silently. And that was the other part. Like, do people hang themselves silently? Like, did he just say, I'm going to die as quietly as possible? And so his inmate, Tortellini or whatever the guy's name is, the one that had 5 people buried in his backyard. He was like, I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. I woke up, he was just there.
Yeah.
Like, it's that nonsense, right? And so it's weird enough where most people would just say, because they don't know. A lot of people would say it's full of it. It's like, that's clearly dodgy. They cleared off the guy. But the reality of it is being somewhere, who knows? But the fact of the matter is, if you did off him, that not knowing is defense and protection. Isn't that weird? Like, if I was trying to hide information and you were trying to hide it in plain sight because you can't hide it in real terms, what you do is you put a lot of other information around it. You can't tell what's true, what's not true. And so you just have people in this kind of belief stuff. And so even if the person gets it right, they don't necessarily know it's a flat fact they got it right. They just think they got it right. And in that, there's no floor. You destroy reality. And in some weird respects, that's kind of how it is. You're right. You should ask that question. Well, why haven't we heard anything from this? Did Epstein have other people that we were connected to? Was this an operation in order to get leverage over people? And if you believe that you had all this stuff when you got Epstein, why did it all of a sudden stop when he died?
Why did it all stop? Yeah, why did nothing come of it? Who else was involved? Right. That's the key. That's another really important key question here. He has some weird connections and weird backing. Who else is involved? This is a conspiracy. To be clear, this is where the term conspiracy theory is 100% applicable. It's a conspiracy. He's working with people. People are doing him weird, shady favors. He has a network that he's built up. He's associating with the world's most powerful people. What the actual hell? It's like along with aliens. And then you remember the, I don't know if you ever saw this, but remember that footage was erased from the record? There was like a couple dozen minutes or something like that of footage from the jail. And it wasn't just that like cameras were not working, but that footage was actually erased during that period of time.
I don't remember the erasure.
Yeah, you can look it up.
But look, I wouldn't be shocked.
No, look it up.
I'm not one of those people that dismiss this notion that somebody helped him off himself.
No.
Because the fact of the matter is, it's so implausible that he was able to do it in the first place. I mean, dude was in a detention cell specifically to prevent him from committing suicide. It's like, and everything failed. Like the cameras failed, the guards, all of them narcoleptic at the exact same time.
Yeah.
Like all of this stuff is just weird. And so it's like, I don't, it's not wrong to ask that question. That's what I'm saying. You should ask that question.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, well, because it's like the dog that didn't bark. It's exactly like the dog that didn't bark. There's this, on the one hand, it's like, okay, there's nothing there. What are you talking about? Where's the evidence? But on the other hand, there should be something there. It's the Sherlock Holmes classic story of the dog who doesn't bark. There's the dog that, you can look it up. I won't rehash it for folks
who
who
prosecuted him for a reason. I mean, they didn't prosecute him, meaning if their argument is that we went after Epstein because he was having sex with kids. Okay, fair enough. And he was an apex pedophile. Fair enough. And that there were other people working with him. Fair enough. And then you add in all of the weird stuff, like you said, with the case and everything else, talking about Acosta saying this is above my pay grade or whatever.
Yes.
There's a lot of weird stuff there.
Shutting down the investigation. Acosta, who I believe was labor secretary under Trump, who was the prosecutor handling this stuff, I believe prosecutor. There's just a couple of specifics, but basically, who shut this down. And then I believe it was in a Daily Beast article. It might have been Vice, but I think it was a Daily Beast. When asked about, they basically quote him. He says, "Why did you shut this down?" "Well, somebody above me told me to. It's above my pay grade." In other words, he stopped the investigation into Epstein. It was the local Florida investigation. He stopped that because somebody above him wanted to. There's clearly a conspiracy theory here. There's clearly.
Didn't tell the victims, by the way.
What's that?
That's why this all went back to court recently. Didn't tell the victims, and the victims had a constitutional duty to know or something like that.
Yeah.
I forget what ended up happening with that. The victims got shafted. But the point is, and the point remains, that if you guys had all this evidence on Epstein prior, when he died, the evidence shouldn't have gone anywhere. And there were clearly people connected to him in some way. Well, you need to figure out what those connections are. And maybe this is one of those things where once you kill the guy, the crime, the person who you can put it on some level goes away. But yeah, I agree with you, Shane. This smells.
Yes.
It smells.
Yeah. Let's take it into a break. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We'll be going into a break, coming back in just a minute. Be right back.
Fault Lines. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We give you the most essential information out there. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
What's the most important hour of the day? It's the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon. On this show, we don't just deliver the latest headlines. We divide the real from the fake. Tune in to hear from some of the most brilliant political minds of today. Get in-depth news and analysis that goes beyond the surface and dig straight into the details. Set your clock to the Critical Hour for a news perspective unlike any of those other guys. Tune in to the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon, weekdays 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern, and catch us on Facebook Live. You're listening to Radio Sputnik.
Fault Lines.
And we're back.
Fault Lines for Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host, Shane Stranahan, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. And we're going to have a conversation about Obama's birthday bash. Obama, of course, if I'm not mistaken, turning 60, and he decided to have a lot of people over. Now, the wild part is it's Obama, and so, of course, it can't just be one day. It has to be 3 days, and it can't just be one or two guests. It has to be a ton of guests. They all have to be uber celebs. Over 200 staff were in attendance, including servers and parking attendants. Now, the catch is they wore masks. Obama and its attendees didn't necessarily have to. And this included John Wayne, Chrissy Teigen, Dwayne Wade, basketball player, Tom Hanks, and of course, Erykah Badu. To have a conversation about this, we're joined with the one and only Ted Rall. Ted Rall is a political cartoonist. He's syndicated.
He is not. Ted, we're still trying to book Ted. Ted is an inveterate, constant, regular guest. No, check the chat. No, he's a great guest. No, you're good. We got Tarif calling. We do have callers, even though we didn't put it out there. Tarif. Well, Jamal, we can come back to that for a second, but Tarif called it a very fortunate, sort of fortuitous time.
Cool.
Without even putting out the number. Tarif, you're on. What's going on? What's on your mind, man?
How y'all doing? I have 3 comments. I'm trying to kind of forgetting the third comment, but y'all need to have Whitney. Oh, first of all, free drone signs, free Danger, enhanced all Haiti. Y'all need to have, in my opinion, Whitney Webb on to explain about Epstein and his connections with, Palantir and cyber reasons and all that. She can break things down. She was on the show. She was on George Gatter's show 3-4 weeks ago, and she was breaking things down. My 2 other comments. Rand Paul came out yesterday, and he was talking about people need to stand up against this anti-science type of mandates, which it is, because science is not just left or right. It's is neutral, and you always have two counter opinions or tests towards what's going on, dealing with whatever the subject is, dealing with vaccines or dealing with anything else. So we need to have a debate on mandates, and people shouldn't be forced to take vaccines if they don't want to. All right. And also, my last comment is dealing with this feudalism, this classism. You see it every once in a while where certain people can be in front of the state capitol and other people can't. You can't protest against Medicare for all because last year I remember when they had a protest. The beginning of this year when they had a protest for Medicare for all at the D.C., they had police with riot shields next to them. But yet you have a group can protest in front of the Capitol, and you got people can dance and shake, do the stinky leg at these parties with no mask on, but the staff have to wear masks. But they tell you that you have this rich feudalism that you gotta have. If you famous or rich, you differ from everybody else. No, you're not. That's going against humanity. That's going against civil rights. It's going against the Constitution. This country was intended for everybody to achieve something great, even though it started off wrong. But that feudalism got to be called out. It's wrong. So yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Agreed. Classism works for me, but feudalism I think gets at it too. But that's nitpicking. Agreed. Both. And I made those same claims just a couple of minutes ago, talking about specifically Barack Obama's birthday party, which is it's over the news. Jamarl, we were talking about that briefly. What did you think about Sharif's comment on that?
Wait, can you guys hear me? I'm not sure if you can hear me.
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. For one, science is not neutral. Science has never been neutral. Never will be, because it takes very clear positions on things. And it takes those positions based on an evidentiary trail. And so when Neil deGrasse Tyson comes out and says Pluto is not a planet, I don't care about your feelings, that's not him being cuddly. That's him basically saying, based upon our standards of what a planet is, this doesn't count. Screw your feelings. And I was one of those people who was in my feelings about the whole Pluto not a planet thing. What do you mean? What do you mean? I grew up with Pluto being a planet. It takes positions. When it says hydrochloroquine is nonsense, it doesn't work for COVID, well, that's a position. It's a very clear position, and it can show you the evidentiary trail for it. So science is not this neutral stuff. It's never been neutral. It never will be neutral. From the standpoint of, even people make this argument about whether technology is neutral. Oh, that gets into a whole other thing about society and bias of society and everything else. I do agree with the free Julian Assange and Donziger. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
But what about Obama? The thing I brought you in on, and I know you were responding to Tarif generally. I was kind of pivoting, but with the Obama party, coming back to it, he brought up the point about classism, where you have the staff, the workers.
Right, by the way.
What'd you say?
He's right about that. There is a class. I mean, when the person, I think it was CNN, was talking about it, it was like, oh, these are sophisticated people. What do you mean sophisticated? It's like they're sophisticated vaccinated people. That's what they said. And it's like, wait a minute. So, wait, what if they were just vaccinated? That wouldn't have been enough to have to be sophisticated too. Like, it's both. Like, it's that part.
Yeah,
you didn't have to add sophisticated in.
That's the most despicable kind of messaging. And I'm having to take I will often do this. You'll say something and I'll be like, that's horrible. And then I take it too far because let
me find it. Because it was a tweet. It was something I put up.
But I'll put it like this. What is that? That's not just classism. That's a kind of like, it's ivory tower intellectualism, and it's at its worst, where it's like, these are sophisticated people who are doing this for reasons that you can't understand. But if you were as intelligent or at least as knowledgeable as they were, you'd get why they don't have to wear masks. They're in a different class than you. They're a different level of person than you. You don't need to think about it, but they're sophisticated, therefore it's okay. That kind of thing. And now clearly I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, but that's the subtext for it, right?
That's kind of where it comes from. I mean, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no royalty stuff.
Yes.
I mean, he's partying for 3 days. Like, for God's sake. It's like a president. I'm partying for 3 days. I'm having all of my celeb friends to come with me on this party. I gotta be honest. I look at this and I think to myself, is this any different than a restaurant? I think I asked this before. If I had a restaurant and we allow people to come in, what we start doing all across the country now, and they don't need masks the moment they come into the restaurant, they're up, they're eating, they're moving around, they're walking, and everything else. This is different. Now the staff at the restaurant has to wear masks. And by the way, this isn't a rah-rah. Because I want to hate this. but I also feel the need to be fair. Is it any different than my wife and I going out for dinner?
Yes.
Oh,
because
and because I don't know the answer. I don't know how it's different.
Because this is a class of people who has habitually hectored the public and vilified the public for doing very similar things to the things they're doing now. These are the hypocrites. And hypocrisy is an incredibly effective argument when the parties at hand say they're on a different level of moral standing. I'll put it like this. If I was on the same level as Obama and I called him a hypocrite, he could just as well call me a hypocrite because he'd be right, because I am a hypocrite. If I didn't have double standards, I wouldn't have standards in the first place. But so he would be right in saying that. But where the claims of hypocrisy start to come into full effect is when the person you're making them against is acting as an authority. When they're acting as if they're above it, or if they've done something, or they have some quality, they have some capacity that gives them the right to say these things. And if you can catch them in, being a hypocrite, if you can catch them in that hypocrisy, that's a huge coup for you. Obama is in the class of people who's told all of us, all the public, if you don't get vaccinated, if you don't wear masks specifically, if you don't do what we're telling you to do, you're a bad person, you're killing people, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, what are they doing? Well, he's having a party without wearing a mask. What right does he, and this is the ultimate thing, that this is the undercutting aspect of how they've managed this whole crisis. What right do they have to tell anybody how to do anything when they're not even following their own recommendations? And it's ultimately, it's a tragedy, not for them, but for us, because people are still dying. People, they have elite medical protection. If Donald Trump gets sick with COVID, he has hands-on access to every possible treatment available to anybody. But for us, we get sick and we die, right? What's your take on that, Jamarl?
Right here, a New York Times reporter on CNN justifying Obama's maskless birthday bash said he only invited sophisticated vaccinated crowd. Sophisticated vaccinated crowd.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I mean, I look at this stuff and I think, if you are in government, by definition, you are a representative. And you're going to be making rules and laws, et cetera, et cetera. I agree with you on the hypocrisy thing. That's problematic. It was problematic in the UK where that cat got caught, basically absconding the mask rules or ignoring the mask rules. And even for Rashid Tlaib, who, has been very heavy on the mask thing and was kind of caught at a party, dancing and twirling about. I don't know. I think I'm conflicted on this one. I agree with you in part about the hypocrisy part, but I also, on some level, disagree that, well, yeah, but we've been doing it. Like, that's the part that I can't get my head around, or that's the part that I can't get over.
But we haven't been telling us you're a bad person for not wearing a mask indoors or whatever. Like, I'll put it like this. If you'd been saying that, and then I saw you inside a restaurant without a mask on, hanging out, and you were just chilling, you were walking around the place, you went to the bathroom, you were talking with people, you were coughing in somebody's face just for the fun of it, I'd be like, hey, that's kind of hypocritical. The public in general, I don't think of it's not like that random person who's not wearing a mask when they're eating a burrito in the taqueria I like to go to sometimes. They haven't been, constantly criticizing me for it. That's the thing. It's who's telling it to you and whether or not they're actual hypocrites. Because in this case, it seems like they clearly are, and it's right for us to hit them on it.
Oh, no, it feels different. So initially, when people got the vaccine, the whole point of getting the vaccine was so you can see your friends, your families, your relatives, et cetera. You can go out, you can have a decent life, et cetera. Like, all those people got the vaccine. And now we're like, oh, that's not enough. You need to really cover up and all. I get the CDC's guidance and everything else has changed. But no, I can't necessarily entirely. At least I feel I'm conflicted on this, like I said.
I wouldn't.
Because on part, I can see this notion of everybody got the vaccine. Everybody did what they were supposed to do. We're having a party. And it's like, oh, no. But the standards have now changed.
I'll look at it from the role model perspective for a minute. I've not used this argument at all yet. Is Obama role modeling good behavior for anybody, or is he just making the people who don't trust him or don't want to take the vaccines, whatever? Is he just making them believe ever more strongly they don't know what they're talking about? They're lying to us. Is he a good role model here? Because I think it's clear now.
Well, Obama told people to get the vaccine. Obama got the vaccine, and Obama went out and had a party to show that he was safe in the midst of the party for people who got the vaccine.
And while violating CDC guidance.
Told him to do.
While violating CDC guidance.
Well, CDC just changed their guidance.
They did, but like that, we've all adapted. The entire
before or after the guidance.
Washington D.C., an entire city is adapted. Obama, former president, you'd think surely could catch up.
No. Actually, a very straight question: was his party being planned 3-day bash before or after the guidance?
Yes, before.
Thank you. That's my point. Like, this stuff was done in advance. But it wasn't like
the party happened after the guidance changed.
He's just saying, okay, I'm just going to flagrantly do whatever I want.
Jamarl, this argument doesn't make sense. This doesn't make sense. There are 200 guests. There are more than 200 masks available. Masks. I can go down to any goddamn corner on the street, get masks. If they wanted to keep, if the requirement was, and this would be perfectly consistent with CDC guidelines. And again, I'm not just playing hall monitor here. They could give everybody a mask for free.
Sounds like you are playing hall monitor.
No, I think there's this weird resistance to criticizing Obama because people don't want to criticize the king, even progressives.
Do you honestly believe I have a resistance to criticizing Obama?
I don't know what else. I don't know what it would be.
Are you serious? You think that my issue here is that I have an issue criticizing Obama? That's your assertion that my reasoning. It's not whatever my reasoning is, but there's something behind my reasoning about this that I'm just lying to you about it.
It might, again, I don't know what it is, but there's something it feels like there's something weird because he's totally hittable on this. This is horrible. This is horrible. He's flouting the guidance of.
I don't think he is as hittable.
Isn't he betraying Biden by doing this?
Honestly, if I'm being honest.
Aren't we all supposed? Why not hit him on it? Go for it. Sorry. I keep cutting.
What seems to be the case is you're looking for a reason to hit him, as opposed to just being bluntly honest about the situation.
But how am I being bluntly dishonest? How am I avoiding anything?
It's not as clear as you're trying to make it out to be. Fact of the matter is, initially the plan was people get a vaccine so they can go back to their life. That's a flat fact of the statement. He planned a birthday bash with a bunch of people that got vaccinated. Okay, flat fact statement. The ruling, or from the standpoint of the CDC, changed almost on a dime after that thing took place. I think it was like last month. All right, now there's a party. None of them want to wear masks because I don't believe for a moment that anybody likes wearing masks.
Oh, but wait, does that? But hang on a second. I can't go into Whole Foods. I live just a couple blocks away from a Whole Foods. I haven't even tested this, but my brother tested it and he got turned away. He had to go back home. He forgot to grab his mask. He forgot about it.
Everybody in Whole Foods is vaccinated.
What'd you say?
Everyone in Whole Foods is vaccinated.
How the hell am I supposed to know? Are you saying that everybody was proven to be? Okay. The CDC is recommending that everybody, and it's not just because you don't know, it's because people can catch it. Anybody who goes to this event,
my point to you is that the ruling and everything else changed in the time frame that the party was being created.
But there's plenty of time to adapt.
Up to like maybe a week ago, but the ruling had been.
I get it, but we all adapt. I've already argued against this, and I think I won. We all adapt. We can all. This is
you didn't win. I'm sorry, you didn't win this.
But here's the.
I know you think you won. Everybody thinks.
I'm sorry. I was provocative there. I just want to finish my point. A week is actually a lot of time. I went from, hey, the CDC changed this guidance to we questioned it. Sure, I was wearing my mask inside of stores the next day. And guess what? The headline for this birthday party was, hey, Obama's going to have this huge 800-person, he's going to have this massive party. 800 plus people are coming in. He got criticized for it. He announced it, and we read it in the headlines. This is getting downscaled. There's going to be less people there, et cetera. He made that adaptation. He dramatically shrunk the list. And you're saying he can't give people masks? You're saying he doesn't have enough time to adapt? It doesn't make sense. When people start falling on arguments like that are just nonsensical, I'm like, wait, there's something else going on here.
There's a few problems with this. You accused me of lying in the beginning, which I think is BS.
Wait, when did I accuse you of lying?
You have nothing to base that on.
When did I accuse you of lying?
Now, I can start making arguments that you have stuff going behind the scenes in regards to the stuff that you're coming up with, but I don't tend to do that.
But wait, when did I accuse you of lying?
That's the first point. The second point is, I never said that he couldn't give a mask. Obama is a multimillionaire. If Obama wanted to give people masks, I'm pretty sure Obama could go to the drugstore and give people masks. It's a ludicrous argument. It was never made, straw man. On the other part, my point to you is that he planned a party before all of this took place. And the momentum for all of this stuff was, if you get vaccinated, you can basically go out into the world. And then within a few days, all of it changed on the dime. And people were looking for ways to basically go after him for it. Under normal circumstances, I'm perfectly fine with going after Obama. It just seems this is, I don't know, it's looking for stuff or just trying to find anything to hit him on. You can call him a hypocrite. Fair enough.
I think it's major. I think it's major hypocrisy, and I don't think it helps anybody. And I wouldn't be talking about it if I didn't think that talking about it might make some difference too. Like, I think that actually having clear standards on these things reduces the chance that it's like, I don't, here's another way of looking at this. I don't want to be the person who constantly hits Republicans when they're hypocrites, but doesn't hit Democrats or vice versa. I want to hit everybody when they're hypocrites, because it's only through that we can have sort of clean standards. We know what we're talking about.
And we do it all the time. I mean, it's basically the show, right? But if it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I need to find something to hit them on.
Nah, but that's not what's going on. That's not at all what's going on. But that's not what's happening. Tarif called in about it. Was Tarif just looking for something to hit him on? No, it's abhorrent.
I didn't say Tarif. I'm talking about you.
Yeah, but why do you think I'm doing that? Isn't that disingenuous? Isn't that a bad faith argument? I didn't even say that I think that's what's going on. I said there's something weird here, and I tried to fill it in with a blank. Now, then you accuse me of saying you lied, and now you're saying that I don't know, Jamarl.
No, you insinuated. Okay, now we're getting into the weeds. But you basically insinuated that was my motivations or my reasoning.
I said, and then you were like, "Do you really think that?" And I was like, "I don't know, man. I don't know what it is." That's the thing. But whatever.
Well, don't you think that at all?
What'd you say?
You're basically saying we're dishonesty.
I don't think you're dishonest. I don't think you're lying. I think there's like a cognitive dissonance or something, and we go through that. I've gone through that before. I can't think of something right now, but that happens to me kind of frequently. You're like, wait, why am I making this argument? And then you realize that there's just a reticence that you can't articulate until you think about it. You notice that it's there and you're like, okay, there's this other motive. And I don't know.
Look, you can't take an issue with me saying that I think that you're looking for stuff, leaping to find anything to hit this guy on, and then get mad when he's saying that.
I'm not mad. I'm not mad at all. Not mad about it.
Shocked and perturbed that I would make the point of saying, why do you think that there's something behind it?
No, I'm not shocked or perturbed either. If we can move on. I know that Tarif actually called back in. I was bringing Tarif in because it's like, this isn't arbitrary. He thought of it too. Independent invention or whatever. It's like people are converging on something.
Arbitrary.
What?
I didn't say it was arbitrary.
Okay, I don't even remember. I don't even know exactly what you're talking about right now. But we've got callers, and I think we might want to go to them. Let's go to Brave. Brave from Atlanta, calling in, talking about the masks, talking about the Obama party, basically talking about this stuff. Brave, you're on. What's going on?
Hey, what's up, guys? I am absolutely willing to call in just to hit Obama specifically on their party and specifically on the hypocrisy of it. And I don't mind if I'm jumping or reaching, because it's not a hard jump or reach to bound. I'm saying, first and foremost, it's been known for quite a while that vaccinated people could also spread and were spreading and were carrying COVID, right? That information had been out for a very long time and calling about it for a long time. So the CDC didn't really flip on a dime. They just finally stopped ignoring facts they could no longer ignore, right? So that's one. But two, the point, to Shane's point, I guess, that the information came out in quite good timing for Obama and them to get masked. But to Reed's point, they're just too important, too rich, and too powerful, and the rules are for the poor, not for them, so they didn't want to wear a mask. And they probably weren't going to wear a mask even if the CDC had or had not turned that thing over. The idea that you are having a 3-day birthday bash, we have the birthday bash here in Atlanta. You're having a 3-day birthday bash with all your celebrity hot tub friends, right? And you're having this great big party while people are suffering, figuring out how they're going to keep their homes, not get kicked out. Thankful to Joe Biden for extending the eviction moratorium instead of actually doing something about it, but extending it. While all this stuff's going on, Obama's having a 3-day birthday bash with his celebrity friends. That's abhorrent. That's ridiculous. And so I am happy to call in and I'm happy to find friends and people in the street that I agree with or disagree with and wear a flag saying there's something wrong with Obama, there's something wrong with those elites, because it looks ridiculous. And then you still have the
right. I would agree with you that a 3-day birthday bash, where people are being thrown out of their homes, is abhorrent. It's obscene, right? I mean, it's basically Hunger Games, where people are eating to the point, throwing up, so they can eat again, so they can throw up and eat again. It's that stuff. So fair enough. I guess the question comes in on whether or not we're any different than they are with this stuff. And again, I make the point about the restaurant. I don't even know the people who are in the restaurant that I'm in. At the very least, you have some level of knowing that the people who are at the place were vaccinated. I mean, the question comes in, if everybody there is vaccinated, and if the rulings, and you're right, the CDC, from my understanding, looking at I think it was the Times or whatever, that Biden had been knowing that the variants or the Delta variant had breakthrough effect, and that the virus loads and stuff like that could be put, and the CDC might have wanted to change it where these other guys, who Biden didn't necessarily want to do it for political reasons. So that's fair enough. But I got to be honest, I wouldn't want to wear a mask at a party. If I'm being blunt, that's not me being an elite.
We don't want to. But Jamarl, I remember when fairly early on in the lockdowns, I was kind of skeptical of them. And I was talking about the kids. I was like, this is going to have kind of deleterious effects on kids. It's like a year plus that people are going to be basically stuck in their homes. You can't see your friends. And you were like, toughen up, Buttercup. I was raised in hospitals. These kids don't know what's going on. And now you're saying, well, they don't want to wear the masks as if that's any justification. It's a mask. It's the easiest thing. That's the case that we've been making. It's the easiest possible thing you can do.
I think what you guys are missing, I don't disagree with you that they should wear masks, but you're making it look it sounds like the argument being made is the reason these guys didn't wear masks is because they're elitists. And it's like, no, they didn't wear masks because they didn't want to wear masks.
I think they should be held to the same standard that everybody else is.
Both can be true at one time. I think that both can be true at one time because none of us want. I don't like wearing masks. I don't want to wear a mask, and I'm not down to take those crazy vaccinations. So I have to wear the mask where I got to wear the mask, right? But and I would agree that I'm pretty sure they wouldn't want to wear masks. But my specific point is not only do they not want to wear the mask, they're saying we're rich and we're elite and we're not gonna wear it.
That's the attitude. That's at least the feeling that I get. To disagree, I don't believe that's literally what they're saying. But like the sense, and this is why I responded so severely to the sophisticated thing that you brought up earlier, Jamarl.
Sophisticated thing is horrible. That's horrible.
Yeah, it's this sense that like they have their own culture. They, we're above it. That's bad. You're supposed to be our leaders, not our exceptions.
This goes back to George Bush. I don't know if you guys remember this, where George Bush made some comment about the governing class. And he was saying like, yeah, there's a governing class, but you other people, there's something else. There was some comment like that. That's that. It reeks of that.
Yeah.
Sophisticated. These are the royalty of our society. And so, they're vaccinated and they're royalty. So they're great.
Okay.
But if you want to call it hypocritical, fair enough.
We've hit that. We've hit that. I don't want to endlessly mutilate this poor dead horse. There's also, so there are a couple of other things. Did you hear about AOC challenging Chuck Schumer, challenging Senate Majority Leader, second only to Pelosi in the House in terms of potency? Did you hear about this?
I did not hear about this. You mean for the Senate?
Yes, for the Senate.
That's okay. That explains it. All right, because if you notice, Chuck Schumer has been pushing Biden for the $50,000 student debt to get rid of it. I mean, he's been hitting Biden hard on it. He's been pushing Biden on some of these other policies.
He's been going progressive.
Chuck Schumer's trying to save his job. That's fascinating. I did not know about that. When did this break?
This has come out within the last couple of days. I'm seeing, a bunch of headlines about it yesterday, but basically she doesn't deny it. She hasn't ruled it out, which is itself a big claim. It's like, if I ask somebody, are you running for president next year? Well, first of all, I have to have some specific reasons for asking them that question. But then if they say, well, I don't know, it's kind of telling you something. You know what I mean? To be clear, I'm not planning on running for president this year or any year.
Right. It was like, yeah, I'm just going to run for president tomorrow. That's all. I decided. Nobody does that.
Exactly. But her refusal the fact that she's not ruling it out is like, okay, at least, raises the question, what would that look like? And if she were to win, how likely is it? And if she gets it, what does that do to the DNC and the progressive movement and the rest of the country? What does that do to the Senate? What does that do to all this stuff? Because right now you've got the coterie of progressives in the House. We call them the squad. But what's in the Senate? Not all that much, right?
Interesting, man. I mean, can she even win that? I mean, because New York, it's not, like, it's one thing to be a representative in a district. The state is something different. But who knows? I mean, she could even be using it for political effect as a threat. Chuck, you better do your job or else you're shooting back.
Yeah.
No, that's a fascinating thing. And then, like you said, who takes her place? Like, let's say she does win it. Who becomes leader of the House Majority Leader?
Yeah.
And more to the point, though, I think Democrats are going to have problems. if they can't get this infrastructure bill passed, and if they can't put stuff in people's pockets where the people are like, wow, they did X and Y, then they're going to lose either the House or the Senate. I mean, I'm initially, my thought, when this term first started, I was like, you know what? If he even gets 20%, even like honestly tried to get 20%, and instead he didn't try to get anything. He's just there, puff of smoke. And look, if you want to hit these guys on hypocrisy, there's plenty of stuff. I mean, the environmental stuff. That new report, what is the IPCC report that just came out on climate from the UN?
Yeah, UN, exactly.
Oh, man, that thing is horrific. And it's like each time the report comes out, it gets more harebrained, like more hysterical. And scientists don't tend to be hysterical. And you look back at Obama's administration, Biden, these guys aren't dealing with us, if that makes sense. Like, Democrats often have this thing of saying, oh, we believe in science and all this other stuff. You believe it to the degree that it helps your cause.
Yes.
Let's be clear. And
Agreed.
Environmental thing.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. It's out of a deeper love for science, proper science, that I'm often arguing with a lot of the people who are representing quote unquote science in some of these cases. And I'm kind of reverting back into the general vaccine conversation. I don't even know exactly what I'm talking about, but there's scientism is a thing, and the use of science for political expediency, the use of science because you want to, because it's helpful, it's beneficial for your cause or whatever, that in the process that subverts science. Now, governments need to do that. I've made this case before. I'm just restating it briefly. Governments need to do that. It's not like they can exempt themselves from that need, but what does that do to science? Are you going to damage science? I don't know how that damages the political system, but it certainly damages science. You'd think it enriches the political system. You'd think that, you bring everything that you've learned into politics. That's good. But what does it do when it flows in the other direction? Because all of a sudden, we can't trust, you feel like you can't trust them. If you can't trust your political establishment and they've come to be the voice of the scientific establishment, then all of a sudden you can't trust your scientific establishment. And God, without science, what would we have in the 21st century, Jamarl? God, as Nietzsche famously said, was dead.
God dead.
Yeah, exactly. God, we killed him. That was his argument. We killed him. What are we left with? Science. And if science is dead, if science is merely a tool of politics, all bets are off, man.
Left with idiocy. Do you remember that movie?
Idiocracy?
Idiocracy, yeah. It's that. And it feels, and when I look at the left and I look at the right, I feel like that's where we are, or that's where we're going. Because you're right. We don't have anything else to understand our world short of measurement, experiment, observation, etc.
Yeah.
And while I would agree that there are, these more esoteric states, those are things that I can definitively prove outside of this kind of, my own subjective reference or people doing, studies with that stuff. But even that can be studied. Like we may run into problems as humanity in regards to applying it honestly, but it's there and it could be applied. It's just the scientific methods of, how do we understand our world? That's a rock, that's a this, that's a classification, that's an observation, that's et cetera. And we go from there. Short of that, it's just religious dogma. It's just people just making stuff up.
Yeah.
And to get across how strong science is, the new high priests, even people who don't believe it, use it. Like they would be like, I believe in a flat earth, but I use science to prove that it's a flat earth. It's like, okay, buddy. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, the battle's already won. That's the weird thing about it is that, yeah, it's not exactly a conversation about do we like science or do we not like science. I don't think that for the most people that's where it's coming from. It's like, which science do we trust? Which really, because it's politics, it's like, which camp do we want to fit in with, Quick headline here. This is breaking news right now. A Miami building has been evacuated as structures in the area face heightened security. Apparently this morning, coming out within the last couple of minutes, Miami building has been evacuated, 138 units after it was deemed unsafe. I'm not saying it hasn't collapsed. That's not happening. But again, this is all, of course, part of the repercussions from the collapse last month, or really late June, when the Champlain Towers collapsed, killing just under 100 people. That's happening right now. Sorry for interrupting, Jamarl.
Wow. No. I interrupted you. I didn't hear. It's just a slight miss sometimes in regards to the change over between Skype versus call. That's unfortunate, man. It's like we just see all of this, I don't know, for a country to have this much wealth, this shouldn't happen. It feels like we should have a different society. I don't mean to be Pollyannish about it. But I don't think it's Pollyannish to say that people shouldn't have lead in their water or buildings shouldn't fall down.
No, it's always just what do you do about it, you know? I mean, but of course not. No. And the very point of using the word should, again, just briefly philosophical, is to motivate yourself in some sense. It's like I am portraying this as unacceptable, or this would be a better way for things to be. It's, you know, gotta change things, which if you don't have that, then you're just a lump of coal, aren't you? If you're not trying to adapt or improve, or the problem, of course, becomes when it gets utopian, or when you're sort of dreaming in your shoulds. It's like, oh, the world could only, if only the world could be this way, or if only I were in power, I would have such and such in place, you know?
Or if everybody just agreed with the exact same thing,
yes,
we can move forward. It's that stuff.
It's that stuff, but there's also truth. There's also some truth to it too, because we were having this conversation earlier this morning about longevity and society and health, and you know, we've had this one in different forms before. If only society were different, only we all agreed about this, you know?
Right. Yeah. Unfortunately, this is what we got.
This is where we are.
Kind of. How do you get the Rubik's Cube into something else? And look, not everybody even wants a Rubik's Cube into something else. A lot of people are perfectly, you know, those people at that party, I'd imagine all of those people love life. They think life is phenomenal. They were able to, you know, ham it up with Obama for 3 days. But not everybody's living that. In fact, the overwhelming majority of the world is not living that. And the catch is like, how do you get the Rubik's Cube? The thing is, I don't think, personally, that stuff could exist, meaning Obama stuff and that, you know, this sophisticated class, and having a different world. I don't think it works that way. Now, I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, and you could disagree with it. But the moment that you create this kind of weird elite clique, and even that to me is weird. It's like, why would a society allow something like that, structures like that, they could create it? If you're 90% of society, why on earth would you allow 3% to get their hands on something that could destroy the rest of the world? It's that stuff. But again, society is not, you know, there's very rarely points where people just stop and say, okay, now what we're going to do.
It's true. And these are like, unless you get a referendum, and this is what conversations, as stupid as they may seem, but I was talking about Obama's birthday party, they're having different things. It's like, those are the moments in which you get a sense, you get a litmus test. Where is society at on this issue? Now, it's going to be biased and it's going to be propagandized, and very often it's not accurate. You have preference falsification. There are all sorts of errors. But really, those are the you know, the opportunities we get to see what society, quote unquote, thinks. When in large part, Margaret Thatcher was actually right. There is no such thing as society, and yet she's also wrong. There is. It's just a bunch of individuals, and you know, they change. It gets into philosophy pretty quickly, but I hear you on that one.
It clicks and everything else.
Yeah.
And look, just to be clear, there is nothing. And I don't mean to rehash how much time we have. Okay.
About a minute now.
There's nothing under the Obama thing for me. Just in case you were very curious. My only motivation, or the thing that's coming from, is kind of exactly what I said. My wife and I, on her birthday or her anniversary, we went out for eating and everything else. And it became this thing like, okay, can I hit the guy if I did basically the same thing? And I have a hard time doing it. That's where it's coming from. It's not, you know, like I've been one of those people who've worn masks when I've gone into buildings short of like restaurants because, you know, like you say, how do you eat a burrito with a mask on? I've subway stations, all that stuff. I don't think there's been anywhere that I've gone so short of like a restaurant. And even then, I think it's only been like 3 over the course of the lockdowns and all. So I get where everybody's coming from on it. And Obama is certainly not my favorite person. I have enough hate stuff out for Obama.
Yeah, I don't think you love Obama. I phrase that poorly. I don't know what it is, but it's something about the Democratic establishment or something like that. But I feel like it's worth hitting him on it. And so I do.
Well, I mean, look, if Democrats have taken this tact, far more than Republicans, that there should be people wear masks. Republicans have just been insane about it, where DeSantis is basically saying, I'm going to defund your wages.
That's the thing.
If you try to enforce the mask
and if the Democrats, at the end of the day, they're partying it up and they're not wearing masks, well, then screw you. And that's why it's a disservice to their own cause, which is part of what's disappointing about it. But everybody has a right to be pissed, I think. We got to close this one out. Jamarl back with me for the first time since last week, starting to feel a little bit better. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Eastern, folks. Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Signing off. Have a great day. See you on the other side.